Chapter 1. Shadows of the Future. The city was quiet. Too quiet for Manhattan, especially at night. Tony Stark stood on the balcony of Avengers Tower, staring into the horizon with a scowl that only deepened as he listened to the sounds, or rather, the lack thereof. New York didn't sleep. Even when its people did, the city buzzed and hummed with its own life. But tonight, there was an eerie stillness hanging over the skyscrapers, as if the entire city was holding its breath. It wasn't just the city's silence that unnerved him. It was the feeling in his gut, a gnawing dread he couldn't ignore. And when the feeling struck Tony Stark, he knew it was best to take it seriously. The glass doors slid open, and Steve Rogers stepped out onto the balcony, joining him. "You feel it too?" Steve's voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. "Yeah," Tony replied. "Something's coming. I don't know what, but it's big." Steve looked out over the city, his gaze hard and calculating. "We've been through worse. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. Hope you're right, Cap. But I've got a bad feeling about this one." Their conversation was cut short by the piercing alarm from the tower's control room. Instinctively, they exchanged a glance before rushing inside. In the main control room, the rest of the Avengers were already gathered. Thor, Natasha, Bruce, Wanda, and the others all wore the same look of anticipation and confusion. "What's going on?" Natasha asked, glancing at the screens. "Something's trying to come through," Bruce said, frowning at the readings. "It's like a signal, but not one I've seen before." "Not from this time," Tony murmured, reading the same data on another screen. His fingers flew over the keys, trying to make sense of the bizarre fluctuations in the readings. "It's coming from the future." The room went dead silent. "Wait," Clint said, breaking the silence. "Are you saying we're getting a message from the future?" Tony nodded grimly. "If my calculations are right, and they always are, it's coming from hundreds of years in the future. Maybe even 1,000. Can we trace it?" Steve asked. Tony's fingers danced over the keyboard, pulling up data and analysis in a flurry. "It's fractured, fragmented, like it's been corrupted over centuries. But I think I can patch it together enough to see what we're dealing with." He turned to the others, his face unusually serious. "But I've got to warn you, it's not going to be pretty." The Avengers watched in tense silence as Tony stabilized the signal. Static hissed through the speakers, and for a moment, it seemed like the signal would remain indecipherable. But then, through the distorted interference, a voice cut through, a voice old and weary, yet laced with a chilling urgency. "If you're receiving this, you're all in grave danger. Kang the Conqueror. He is coming. He will burn your world. There is no escape. He is inevitable." The voice broke into static again, and Tony cursed under his breath as he worked to stabilize it. "Who's Kang?" Wanda asked, her brow furrowed. "Time-traveling tyrant," Tony replied. "He's got more blood on his hands than any warlord in history. And he's not just some villain. He's from the future, which means he's already seen every move we can make. Then he's already seen us win," Steve said with a determined edge. Tony shook his head. "It doesn't work like that, Cap. He's a master strategist, but he's not omniscient. He adapts, shifts timelines to his advantage. If he's chosen this moment to come after us, it means he's figured out exactly how to beat us. Or worse, he's already won in countless other timelines." As Tony spoke, the signal cleared momentarily, and a figure appeared on the main screen. Kang the Conqueror. His face was obscured, hidden behind an armor that seemed to shift and pulse with every breath, like it was alive. His voice was cold and detached, but there was a terrifying sense of certainty in every word. "Avengers," Kang intoned, his gaze like a knife cutting through time. "You stand on the precipice of extinction. I have conquered empires that span the stars, bent entire worlds to my will. Your time is at an end. Surrender, and I may be merciful. Resist, and I will break you." A moment later, the screen went black. A tense silence filled the room as they stared at the blank screen, Kang's words echoing in their minds. It was Thor who finally broke the silence. "This Kang, he sounds like a fool," he said, his voice a low growl. "He does not know what it means to face the might of Asgard." "Easy there, big guy," Clint said with a nervous chuckle. "We're talking about someone who's been waging wars across time. Something tells me he's not just another Loki. Regardless, we can't sit around waiting for him to make the first move," Natasha said, her voice calm but firm. "If he's coming for us, we need to be ready." Tony nodded. "Agreed. But if we're going up against someone who can manipulate time itself, we're going to need more than our usual tricks. I'll reach out to Strange, see if he can help us get a read on Kang's movements. I'll prepare the defenses," Bruce said, already pulling up schematics for the tower's security systems. Whatever this guy's got planned, we're going to make sure he doesn't get the upper hand. Steve nodded, his gaze steely. We'll hit him with everything we've got. But remember, Kang knows what we're capable of. We have to be unpredictable. We can't let him see us coming. As the Avengers dispersed to prepare for the impending battle, Tony lingered by the screen, staring at the blank monitor. He couldn't shake the image of Kang's face, or rather, the lack of it. Behind that mask, Kang had been utterly impassive, almost as if he was bored, like this was all just another game to him. And that was what scared Tony the most. The next few days were a blur of preparation and anticipation. Tony and Bruce worked around the clock, reinforcing Avengers Tower and designing countermeasures for potential temporal attacks. Strange arrived a day later, offering his assistance with his own unique expertise. But it wasn't just a matter of upgrading their defenses. Kang's arrival had unsettled the team in ways that no one wanted to admit. Each Avenger seemed haunted, as if Kang's threats had triggered something deep within them. For some, it was the fear of failure. For others, it was the weight of their own past mistakes. The first attack came without warning. One moment, the city was at peace. The next, the skies above Manhattan were split open by a blinding light. From the rift emerged a fleet of strange, angular ships, their surfaces glinting with a metallic sheen that seemed to absorb the sunlight. Each vessel was adorned with the same symbol, Kang's insignia, a twisted, jagged mark that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Within seconds, the ships began their assault, raining down beams of searing energy upon the city below. Buildings crumbled under the onslaught, and streets were torn apart as the beams carved through asphalt and steel like a hot knife through butter. The Avengers leapt into action. Tony was the first to take flight, his suit blazing as he soared toward the fleet, his repulsors charged and ready. Steve led the ground team, guiding civilians to safety as the others engaged the enemy. But it quickly became clear that these were no ordinary opponents. The soldiers who emerged from the ships were unlike anything the Avengers had ever faced. Clad in sleek, black armor that seemed to phase in and out of visibility, they moved with a precision and speed that bordered on unnatural. Each strike was calculated, each movement a testament to their brutal efficiency. Wanda's powers lashed out, her energy twisting and warping around her as she tried to subdue the soldiers. But even her strongest attacks seemed to barely faze them. For every soldier they managed to take down, two more seemed to appear in their place. Kang had sent them not just an army, but a force that seemed designed specifically to counter the Avengers' abilities. As the battle raged, Tony found himself facing a lone figure on one of the rooftops. A soldier clad in armor that was unmistakably similar to his own. The figure tilted its head, almost as if studying him, before charging forward with a speed that caught Tony off guard. The fight was brutal, a clash of metal and energy as Tony struggled to hold his ground. Whoever this soldier was, they knew his every move, countering him at every turn. It was only by sheer luck that he managed to land a final blow, sending the soldier plummeting off the rooftop. But as Tony watched the figure fall, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. By the time the last of Kang's soldiers had been defeated, the city lay in ruins. The Avengers regrouped, each of them battered and bloodied, but alive. Yet as they surveyed the devastation around them, a sense of dread settled over the team. This was only the first wave. And they all knew it. Kang wasn't just coming for them. He was coming for everything. Chapter 2. The Rising Storm. The devastation of New York left the Avengers shaken. Hours after the last soldier had fallen, the team still scoured the wreckage, searching for survivors and salvaging what little they could from the city's remains. Tony hadn't spoken in hours, his mind a whirlwind of calculations, all of them pointing to one terrible truth. Kang was only beginning his assault. He called an emergency meeting at Avengers Tower. They gathered in the dimly lit conference room, each hero bearing fresh scars, their faces pale and drawn. The air was thick with tension as Tony pulled up a series of holographic images showing recent temporal disturbances across the globe. "Look," he said, his voice flat. "These aren't just random attacks. Kang's forces have been striking strategic locations, targeting cities and resources that could be critical to our response." He gestured to the floating map. "London, Tokyo, Cairo. But it's not just today." The screen shifted, displaying images from various time periods. A medieval castle under siege by soldiers in armor eerily similar to Kang's. A Victorian street in flames, with futuristic drones flying overhead. A desert battlefield from what looked like the Roman era, where men in legionnaire armor were falling under a hail of plasma bolts. Natasha's eyes narrowed. He's spreading us thin. If we can't be everywhere at once, we can't mount an effective defense. Exactly, Tony replied, his jaw set. He's forcing us to fight on his terms, hitting us from multiple points in time. Every attack is like a surgical strike, precise, brutal, and devastating. Steve took a deep breath, his expression grim. Then we're going to need to divide our forces. Each of us will take a different era, do whatever we can to push Kang's forces back. We don't have the numbers to fight him everywhere, but if we can disrupt his operations, even delay him, we might stand a chance. The room fell silent as they considered the weight of his words. Wanda's face was pale, but her eyes burned with determination. How do we even prepare for this? Half of us haven't fought with swords and shields, let alone whatever weapons they used 1,000 years ago. Leave that to me, Tony replied, his mind racing with ideas. I'll outfit each of you with equipment suited for the time period. Energy sources, hidden weaponry, anything we can hide in plain sight. We can't use modern tech openly. Kang's soldiers would be on us in an instant. But if we're smart, we can level the playing field. Then let's get moving, Thor said, his voice low but firm. We've wasted enough time here. Every second we delay is another victory for Kang. The team divided into pairs, each pair assigned a different time period. Steve and Natasha would be heading to feudal Japan. Tony and Bruce would tackle the Renaissance in Florence. Thor and Wanda were dispatched to ancient Egypt, while Clint and Strange took on Victorian England. Each pair prepared for their mission with a heavy sense of urgency, knowing that each decision they made would affect not only their survival, but the entire timeline. Within hours, the Avengers had vanished from the present day, scattered across different eras, each of them armed and ready to face Kang's forces. But it wasn't long before they realized just how prepared Kang was. Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff stepped into the misty mountains of feudal Japan, dressed as traveling samurai. Their armor was light but sturdy, with hidden compartments for throwing knives and smoke bombs. The scent of pine and wet earth surrounded them as they moved silently through the dense forest, every sense heightened. Ahead, a small village came into view, nestled in the valley. But the scene that greeted them was anything but peaceful. Kang's soldiers were there, clad in black, using weapons that looked both ancient and futuristic. They moved with ruthless efficiency, torching houses and herding terrified villagers into a line. A woman shrieked as one of the soldiers struck her, sending her sprawling into the mud. Steve's jaw clenched. "Ready?" he asked, glancing at Natasha. She nodded, her eyes cold and focused. "Always." With a battle cry, they sprang into action. Steve's shield slammed into the nearest soldier, the impact sending him sprawling. Natasha moved with deadly precision, taking down soldier after soldier with swift, silent strikes. The villagers looked on in awe, but Steve and Natasha had no time to acknowledge them. More soldiers were pouring in from the trees, their weapons crackling with energy. It was a brutal fight. The soldiers were faster, stronger than any normal human, and their tactics were ruthless. But Steve and Natasha held their ground, their skill and experience turning the tide of the battle. By the time the last soldier fell, the village was in ruins, but the villagers were safe. One elderly man approached Steve, bowing deeply. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "We would have perished without your help." Steve shook his head. "Stay hidden. Kang's forces will return, and we may not be here to stop them." As they turned to leave, Natasha paused, her gaze lingering on the smoldering ruins. "How many more villages like this will we find, Steve? How much more destruction?" He didn't answer. The answer was already written in the ash-stained air around them. Meanwhile, in Renaissance Florence, Tony and Bruce had found themselves in a lavish palace, mingling with aristocrats dressed in elaborate silk gowns and velvet cloaks. The air was thick with the scent of incense and wine, a stark contrast to the quiet tension that simmered between them. Tony's hand rested on a concealed energy blaster disguised as a gauntlet. Bruce was doing his best to blend in, though his hulking frame drew more than a few curious glances. "Look for anything out of place," Tony whispered, scanning the crowd. Kang's soldiers could be hiding anywhere. They moved through the palace, their eyes keen, until they reached a grand hall where a crowd had gathered around an enormous marble statue. Tony's heart sank as he recognized the statue's face. It was Kang, carved in terrifying, lifelike detail. As they watched, a group of soldiers in ornate armor emerged from the shadows, positioning themselves around the room. The lead soldier raised a hand, silencing the crowd. Florence is now under the protection of Kang the Conqueror, he declared, his voice carrying a cold authority. Resist, and you will suffer the consequences. Without hesitation, Tony activated his blaster, and a beam of energy shot across the room, catching the soldier off guard. Chaos erupted as the guests fled, their screams echoing off the marble walls. Bruce, unable to hold back any longer, transformed into the Hulk with a furious roar, tearing through the soldiers with savage force. The battle was intense and unrelenting. Kang's forces seemed to multiply, flooding the hall from hidden corridors and secret doors. For every soldier the Hulk crushed, 2 more took their place, until the hall was a blood-soaked battleground. But in the end, they emerged victorious. Bruised and battered, Tony and Bruce surveyed the wreckage. Florence had been saved, but the cost was high. The Grand Hall lay in ruins, and Tony knew that Kang's reach was only growing. Thor and Wanda had fared no better in ancient Egypt. Under the scorching desert sun, they had found themselves facing an army that stretched as far as the eye could see. Kang's forces marched in perfect unison, their armor glinting in the sunlight, their banners bearing the twisted insignia of their master. Thor raised his hammer, his gaze fierce. "Are you ready, Scarlet Witch?" Wanda's eyes glowed red as she summoned her power, her voice a low, dangerous murmur. "Let's show him what we're made of." They charged into the fray, Thor's lightning cutting through the ranks like a blade, while Wanda unleashed a storm of energy that sent soldiers flying. The desert sands turned red as they fought, their powers ripping through the enemy with a ferocity that left even Thor breathless. But Kang's forces were relentless. Even as they cut down soldier after soldier, more arrived, their faces blank and emotionless. Wanda's energy began to falter, her movements slowing as exhaustion set in. Thor's arms ached as he swung Mjolnir again and again, each strike taking more out of him. Finally, with one last surge of power, they broke through the enemy's ranks. The desert fell silent, save for the crackle of Thor's lightning as he lowered his hammer, his chest heaving. "We've won," Wanda murmured, though her voice held little triumph. Thor nodded, his gaze distant. "This is only the beginning. Kang will send more." In Victorian England, Clint and Strange were facing their own nightmare. They had arrived in London, only to find the city shrouded in darkness, the streets empty and silent. Gas lamps flickered in the mist, casting eerie shadows on the cobblestone streets. "Be ready," Strange whispered, his hand gripping his amulet. "Kang's forces are near." As they moved through the city, they heard the clinking of armor and the quiet hum of energy weapons. Strange summoned a protective barrier just as a volley of energy blasts erupted from the darkness, striking the shield with enough force to make Clint stagger. The soldiers emerged, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Clint fired arrow after arrow, each one striking its mark with deadly precision. Strange spells lashed out, engulfing the soldiers in flames and light. But the soldiers advanced, relentless, unfazed by the destruction around them. By the time the last soldier fell, London's streets were littered with bodies, the air thick with smoke. Clint lowered his bow, his hands trembling. "This is madness. How many more are there?" Strange's gaze was dark. "As many as it takes." When the Avengers returned to the present, each of them bore fresh scars and weary expressions. They had won each battle, but the war was far from over. Kang's forces had tested their limits, revealing weaknesses they hadn't known they had. The future looked bleak, but they knew they had no choice but to press on. Tony addressed the team, his voice hollow. "We held him back for now, but we've barely scratched the surface. If we're going to stop him, we'll need more than just brute force." Steve nodded, his face grim. "Then we keep fighting, no matter what it takes." And as the Avengers prepared for the next phase of their battle, each of them knew that the cost of victory was rising. Kang's dynasty was spreading, and their only hope was to find a way to break it before it broke them. Chapter 3. Shattered Unity. The atmosphere in Avengers Tower was heavy with tension. The heroes had returned from their respective battles, their bodies marked by scars and bruises, their minds haunted by memories of chaos and violence. The usual camaraderie was replaced by a sense of unease, as if the very air crackled with unspoken fears. Tony Stark stood before the holographic display, his brow furrowed in concentration. The shimmering map of the world was dotted with red markers, each one representing a location that Kang had targeted. Each attack was meticulously documented, revealing a pattern that left Tony more anxious than ever. "Look at this," he said, gesturing to the map. "Kang isn't just attacking at random. He's trying to carve out a domain, a power structure. Every strike is deliberate, and it's getting closer to us. Natasha leaned over the console, her eyes scanning the markers. He's mapping out the future he wants. And if we don't stop him, we'll be living in it. Steve crossed his arms, a troubled expression on his face. We need to gather more intel. Find out what his ultimate goal is. If we can get into his mind, maybe we can anticipate his next move. The room fell silent as they considered Steve's words. It was a stark reminder that they were not just fighting against an enemy, but against a master manipulator. One who had already shown that he could outthink and outmaneuver them at every turn. Bruce adjusted his glasses, his expression troubled. What if we had someone on the inside? If we could infiltrate his ranks, gather intelligence directly from him? It's a risk, Clint said, his voice low. If Kang discovers we're trying to penetrate his forces, it could spell disaster for us. We're already stretched thin as it is. Agreed, Wanda interjected, her voice barely above a whisper. But what choice do we have? We need an advantage. Tony turned away from the console, his expression shifting to one of resolve. I'll set up a task force for reconnaissance. We'll need stealth and skills that can blend in. It'll be a dangerous mission, but it might give us the edge we need. Count me in, Natasha said, her tone fierce. I'm no stranger to infiltration. I'll go with you, Clint added, stepping forward. If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. Then it's settled, Tony said, nodding. We regroup in a few days and see what we've learned. But we have to be cautious. Kang is not someone to underestimate. As they prepared to disperse, Steve paused, looking around at his friends and allies. Remember, we're all in this together. We can't afford to fracture. Kang thrives on division. But even as he spoke, a flicker of doubt crept into his heart. He had seen the strain on each of their faces, the burdens they carried. He knew that the weight of this war would push them to their limits, and that they would have to fight not only Kang, but the shadows that threatened to divide them from within. Days passed, and the tension within the tower grew palpable. Tony's task force began training for their infiltration mission, refining their skills and honing their instincts. Natasha and Clint worked tirelessly, perfecting their strategies and stealth techniques. Bruce immersed himself in research, analyzing Kang's technology to find potential weaknesses. Yet amid the preparations, the emotional strain weighed heavily on the team. Steve found himself increasingly isolated, the leader burdened by the knowledge that every decision could mean life or death for his friends. He felt the fractures growing within the group, each hero facing their own demons, doubts creeping into their minds. During a late-night training session, Steve sought solace in the gym, the sound of punching bags being struck echoing in the empty space. He was lost in thought, a storm of emotions raging within him, when he was joined by Wanda. She approached quietly, her presence a comforting balm against the chaos. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly, watching him throw punch after punch. Steve paused, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "No, just thinking." "About the mission?" she probed, concern lacing her voice. "About everything," he admitted, turning to face her. "About Kang. About us. It feels like we're all on edge, like something's about to break." Wanda nodded, her brow furrowing. "I feel it too. The tension, it's like a storm brewing. We've faced threats before, but this feels different. Kang isn't just trying to conquer us. He's trying to break us." "Exactly," Steve replied, running a hand through his hair. "If we don't find a way to hold ourselves together, we're going to lose more than just the battles. We'll lose each other." Wanda stepped closer, her eyes filled with empathy. "We have to trust each other, Steve. We can't let fear take hold. We're stronger together." His heart swelled at her words, but a flicker of doubt remained. But what if it's not enough? What if we can't stop him? Before Wanda could respond, the door swung open, revealing Tony, his expression serious. "We need to talk. Now." They followed him to the conference room, where the rest of the Avengers were gathered. Bruce was hunched over a laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. Natasha leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, while Clint paced anxiously. "Okay, so here's what we've got," Tony said, standing at the head of the table. "I've managed to tap into Kang's network. It's risky, but we've got a window to send a team into his stronghold. We'll gather intel directly. Have you pinpointed his location?" Natasha asked, her voice steady. "Yeah, it's a floating fortress, cloaked in time itself. It's got defenses we've never seen before, but if we're smart about it, we can get in and out before he realizes what's happening. I'll lead the infiltration team," Natasha volunteered immediately. "I'm going with you," Clint added, his voice firm. Tony raised an eyebrow. You're both good, but this mission requires stealth and subtlety. I need you to be ghosts, not warriors. I can be a ghost, Clint retorted. Trust me, we'll do this without drawing attention. I can create illusions, Wanda chimed in, her gaze sharp. If we can mislead their sensors, we can slip right past them. Fine, Tony conceded. But I want this to be quick. In and out. We can't risk Kang discovering us. As they began to strategize, Steve felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew the risks of the mission were significant, but what worried him more was the growing distance between them. They were all driven by fear, their anxieties manifesting as anger, impatience, and doubt. What about the rest of us? Steve asked, trying to keep his voice calm. What's our plan if something goes wrong? While they're inside, we'll coordinate from here, Tony explained, a sense of urgency in his tone. We'll keep a close eye on Kang's movements, but we'll also be ready to act if they're discovered. What if we don't hear back? Steve pressed, his heart racing. What's our backup plan? We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, Tony snapped, frustration evident in his voice. We can't think like that. We have to be focused on the task at hand. Focus is fine, but we need to have contingencies, Steve countered, his voice rising. If we don't plan for failure, we might as well write our obituaries now. Is that what you think? That we're doomed? Tony shot back, his voice tense. Because I refuse to believe that. I'm not saying we're doomed. I'm saying we need to be prepared. Steve retorted, his patience fraying. The room fell silent, tension crackling like electricity. Wanda exchanged a worried glance with Clint, while Natasha stood between them, her expression wary. Guys, Natasha said, her voice steady. We need to focus on the mission. Fighting amongst ourselves isn't going to help anyone. Right, Tony said, his expression softening slightly. Let's not lose sight of what matters. We need to come together and stay united. Kang's counting on us to falter. As they resumed their planning, Steve felt the weight of uncertainty settle over him. He looked around at his friends, knowing that the fractures were deepening, even as they prepared for the fight ahead. Each of them carried their burdens, and he wondered how many more cracks would form before they shattered completely. The night before the infiltration, the team gathered in the common area, tension palpable in the air. Tony had set up a holographic projection of Kang's fortress, its dark silhouette looming over them. He explained the layout, pointing out the security measures they would face. Here's the plan, Tony said, his tone commanding. Natasha, Clint, and Wanda will go in through the west entrance. It's the least guarded. From there, you'll move to the central chamber, where Kang keeps his intel. What? If he's there? Clint asked, concern etched across his face. Then you adapt. You're Avengers. You'll find a way, Tony replied. Wanda studied the layout, her brow furrowing. If I can create a distraction, we might be able to slip in without him noticing. Exactly, Natasha added, her voice firm. We just need to be quick and efficient. Steve listened quietly, his mind racing. He wanted to trust them, to believe in their plan, but the anxiety gnawed at him. The stakes were higher than ever, and each passing moment felt like a ticking time bomb. Remember, we need to stay in constant communication, Tony reiterated. No heroics, just the mission. As they discussed their final preparations, Steve felt a heaviness in his chest. They were all warriors, but they were also friends. He wished he could dispel the doubts lingering in their minds, but he couldn't ignore the truth. Kang was not just an enemy. He was a force that thrived on their fears and uncertainties, and every moment spent fighting among themselves only played into his hands. When the time came for the infiltration, the mood shifted. There was a sense of determination in the air, but also an underlying current of anxiety. Each of them knew that this mission could change everything. As the team suited up, Wanda approached Steve, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. We'll be careful, I promise. We're not going to let Kang win. I know, he replied, forcing a smile. Just come back safe. That's all I ask. She nodded, a flicker of resolve igniting in her gaze. We will. We have to. Tony, standing nearby, caught their exchange and stepped in. All right, team. Let's move. The sooner we get in, the sooner we can get out. The team left the tower, a wave of anticipation washing over them. They boarded their Quinjet, the engines humming with power. As they took off into the night sky, Steve watched the city fade beneath them, the weight of his worries heavy in the air. As they approached Kang's fortress, the massive structure loomed ominously against the backdrop of stars. The fortress was a twisted amalgamation of metal and energy, pulsing with a sinister glow. It felt alive, an entity unto itself, a reflection of Kang's own malevolence. Stealth mode engaged, Tony said, his voice steady as he piloted the Quinjet. Let's keep our presence hidden. With a deep breath, Steve steadied himself, channeling all his focus into the mission. He could feel the tension within the Quinjet, each hero steeling themselves for the fight ahead. As they descended toward the fortress, Clint glanced at Natasha, his eyes filled with concern. Ready. She met his gaze, her expression resolute. Always. When the Quinjet landed silently in a concealed area, the team disembarked, their bodies tense with anticipation. Tony activated their cloaking devices, and they moved like shadows, creeping through the fortress's darkened halls. The air was charged with energy, the faint hum of machinery echoing in the distance. They navigated through the maze of corridors, their hearts pounding in rhythm with their footsteps. Every corner they turned held the potential for danger, and the weight of their mission bore down on them. Stay sharp, Natasha whispered, her voice barely audible. As they approached the central chamber, Wanda focused her powers, creating an illusion that would mask their presence. I can feel Kang's energy nearby, she warned. He's close. Clint nodded, his bow at the ready. Let's hope he doesn't see us coming. They reached the chamber entrance, where a massive door loomed before them, intricately designed and pulsating with energy. Tony activated a small device that began to scan the door's mechanisms. Just a second, he murmured, his eyes darting across the readout. The seconds felt like hours, and the tension was thick as they awaited the results. Finally, with a soft beep, the door slid open, revealing the vast expanse of the chamber beyond. Inside, they found a sprawling array of holographic displays and advanced technology. Kang's intelligence was laid out before them, a treasure trove of information. But there was no sign of the man himself. Look at this, Tony said, approaching a console. He's been tracking every Avenger. Our movements, our weaknesses. He's been one step ahead the entire time. This is exactly what we need, Natasha replied, her eyes scanning the data. We can use this against him. But just as they began to download the information, a blaring alarm pierced the air. Red lights flashed, illuminating the chamber in a crimson glow. Kang knows we're here, Wanda exclaimed, panic rising in her voice. Move. We need to get out now. Tony shouted, urgency fueling his words. As they scrambled to exit, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. You think you can invade my domain unpunished? Kang materialized before them, his presence imposing and malevolent. He stood surrounded by a swirling vortex of energy, a living embodiment of time itself. Fools, he continued, his voice dripping with disdain. You've walked into my trap. The team froze, fear gripping them as Kang extended his hand, summoning a torrent of energy that surged toward them. Steve's instincts kicked in, and he lunged forward, ready to shield his teammates. Get down, he yelled. The energy blast struck the wall behind them, sending debris flying. They stumbled back, but there was no time to regroup. They had to fight their way out. Wanda! Tony shouted. Distraction. With a swift wave of her hand, Wanda conjured illusions of themselves, scattering them throughout the chamber. The duplicates momentarily confused Kang, but he quickly focused on the real team. Your tricks won't save you, he snarled, unleashing another wave of energy. Clint fired an arrow, aimed directly at Kang, but it disintegrated upon impact with the barrier he had conjured. Natasha leaped into action, moving swiftly to flank their foe. Steve, we need to create an opening, she called. Steve nodded, his mind racing. Together. They charged at Kang, their combined powers flaring to life. Steve summoned his shield, deflecting energy blasts as they advanced, while Wanda hurled spells that crashed against Kang's defenses. The chamber erupted into chaos, the very fabric of reality bending under the onslaught. Your defiance is amusing, Kang taunted, his laughter echoing through the chamber. But you cannot win. With a surge of determination, Tony activated his suit's arsenal, launching a barrage of missiles. The projectiles struck Kang, momentarily staggering him. Now, he shouted. Taking advantage of the opening, Clint fired another arrow. This one tipped with a special explosive designed to penetrate energy shields. It struck Kang, causing a powerful explosion that rocked the chamber. As the smoke cleared, Kang staggered, his focus wavering. You think this will stop me? He growled, but his confidence had begun to crack. Let's finish this, Natasha yelled. They pressed forward, a united front against the looming threat. With each blow they struck, they felt the hope of their victory surging within them. They fought with everything they had, pushing Kang back as they fought to regain their lives, their team, and their future. But even as they battled, Steve felt a deep-rooted fear. Kang was a master of time, a manipulator of fate. They were just pawns in his game, and as long as he existed, they would always be in danger. The clash intensified, the energy crackling around them. Just as they thought they had the upper hand, Kang unleashed a pulse of energy that sent them sprawling across the chamber. "Foolish heroes," Kang declared, his voice booming. "You cannot stop what is destined." As the smoke cleared, Kang stood before them, unharmed and more formidable than ever. The fortress trembled with energy, the very walls resonating with his power. It was clear they were outmatched. "Retreat!" Steve shouted, desperation coursing through him. "We need to regroup." As they turned to escape, Kang unleashed a final surge of energy, a shockwave that knocked them off their feet and sent them sprawling across the chamber. "Your time is up," Kang warned, the finality in his voice echoing as they faded into darkness. In the aftermath of their encounter, the Avengers regrouped in the Quinjet, their hearts heavy with defeat. Each of them bore the weight of failure, the realization that they had underestimated their enemy. Tony sat in silence, his mind racing as he processed what had just transpired. They had entered Kang's stronghold with confidence, only to be crushed by the reality of his power. "We should have seen it coming," he muttered, frustration boiling beneath the surface. Wanda sat next to him, her eyes filled with remorse. "I thought we had a chance. I believed we could do it." "Believing isn't enough anymore," Clint replied, his tone bitter. "We need more than hope. We need a plan. Then we regroup and re-strategize," Steve said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "We can't let this define us. We need to find a way to turn the tables on him. We've got to figure out what his endgame is," Natasha added, her expression fierce. "He's too powerful. We need to be smarter." Tony nodded, determination creeping into his voice. "Then let's get to work." "We're not done yet. Not by a long shot." As they flew back toward Avengers Tower, the weight of defeat lingered, but the fire of determination began to kindle once more. They would not allow Kang to dictate their fate. Together, they would find a way to overcome the darkness looming ahead. The battle for their lives had only just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever. The Avengers were fractured, but they were not broken. They would stand united against the storm. In the shadows of the fortress, Kang observed their retreat, a twisted smile curling upon his lips. He had drawn them into his web, had played the game to perfection. The Avengers thought they could outmaneuver him, but they were merely pawns in his grand design. "Let them regroup," he murmured to himself. "They will only be more desperate, and in their desperation, they will reveal their true selves." He had seen the cracks forming within their alliances, the doubts creeping into their minds. The next move would be his, and he would strike when they least expected it. For now, the game continued, and he was determined to emerge victorious. The tension in Avengers Tower was far from resolved. As the team prepared for their next move, the stakes grew ever higher, and the darkness loomed ever closer. Chapter 4. The Turning Point. The Quinjet landed with a soft thud on the helipad atop Avengers Tower, but there was no triumphant return to celebrate. The mood inside the aircraft was heavy, each Avenger burdened by the sting of their defeat at Kang's hands. As they disembarked, an oppressive silence filled the air, broken only by the distant sounds of New York City, a city unaware of the gathering storm. Steve Rogers stepped down first, taking a deep breath as he faced his team. He could see the weariness etched on their faces, the doubt that lingered in their eyes. The mission had gone horribly wrong, and the repercussions weighed heavily on his conscience. The fear of losing not just the battle, but the very essence of what they fought for, gnawed at him. "All right, let's debrief," Tony Stark said, shaking off the defeat. He was already moving towards the main conference room, his mind racing with thoughts of what had gone wrong. The others followed, each step echoing their shared anxiety. Once inside, they took their seats around the table. Tony activated the holodisplay, projecting data from their failed mission. "This is what we gathered from Kang's fortress," he began, scrolling through the chaotic jumble of information. "He's been tracking our movements for a long time. Every mission, every fight, we're living in his playbook." Clint Barton leaned forward, arms crossed, his expression guarded. "We need to figure out what he wants. He's got us on the defensive, and it doesn't feel like he's just playing games." Natasha Romanoff nodded, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "He didn't just want to defeat us. He wanted to demonstrate his power, to instill fear. We walked right into his trap." "Yeah, but why?" Wanda Maximoff interjected, her voice laced with frustration. "What's the end game here? There has to be more to it than just defeating us. Steve placed a steadying hand on the table. We need to approach this methodically. Kang is a master of time, and he's proven that he can manipulate it to his advantage. What if this is just one phase of his plan? What if he wants to draw us out, to test our limits? Test our limits? Tony scoffed, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. He nearly killed us, Steve. This isn't a game, it's war. And right now we're losing. The tension escalated, the weight of defeat pushing down on their spirits. We can't afford to fracture, Steve urged, scanning the faces of his teammates. We need to unite, to focus on how to take the fight to him. As Tony continued to scroll through the information, one particular line caught Wanda's attention. Wait, go back. There, those coordinates. They look familiar. Tony tapped a few buttons, zooming in on the data. That's an old Hydra facility, but it's been abandoned for years. Or so we thought, Natasha said, her tone shifting to one of suspicion. Kang could be using it as a base of operations. Or it's a ruse, Clint added. Kang knows we'll follow the breadcrumbs. He's playing mind games with us. Whatever it is, we need to check it out, Steve said decisively. If there's even a chance that Kang is using that facility, we have to investigate. Tony leaned back, arms crossed over his chest. I'm not keen on running headlong into another trap, Steve. We barely escaped last time. Then we don't go in blind, Natasha countered. We set up surveillance, gather intel before we make our move. Fine. We'll do it your way, Tony relented, but the strain was evident in his voice. But if things go south again, I'm not putting our lives on the line for this. Then let's make sure they don't, Steve said, his resolve unwavering. We need to be smarter this time. This is about more than just us. It's about everyone who depends on us. With the plan set, they began their preparations, a mixture of anxiety and determination fueling their actions. Each member of the team fell into their role, the weight of their mission overshadowing their earlier doubts. As the Quinjet took off once more, Steve felt the tension within him grow. He was leading them back into the fray, but this time he couldn't shake the feeling that they were entering a storm they might not survive. The hum of the engines drowned out his thoughts, but the looming presence of Kang's influence haunted them. The flight to the abandoned facility was quiet, each Avenger lost in their thoughts. As they neared the coordinates, Tony's voice broke the silence. All right, we're almost there. Let's keep our eyes peeled for anything unusual. Clint scanned the landscape below, a mixture of overgrown vegetation and crumbling structures coming into view. This place looks like it's been dead for years. It's too quiet. Wanda's brow furrowed in concentration as she reached out with her powers, sensing for any traces of Kang's energy. I can't feel him, but that doesn't mean he isn't here. As they landed and disembarked, the air felt thick with unease. The facility loomed before them, a monolithic structure engulfed in shadows. Vines snaked up the sides, reclaiming what was once a stronghold of evil. Let's move, Steve commanded, his voice steady as they approached the entrance. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're walking into. The interior of the facility was dark, the faint glow of emergency lights flickering overhead. The atmosphere was suffocating, thick with dust and the remnants of forgotten experiments. As they crept through the halls, the silence was palpable, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. Tony activated a scanner, his suit humming with energy. I'm detecting some life signs deeper inside. Could be remnants of old Hydra tech, or Kang's personnel. Let's hope it's the former, Clint said, his grip tightening on his bow. I'd prefer not to run into any of Kang's goons. They moved deeper into the facility, their senses heightened. The air grew colder, an unsettling chill creeping down their spines. Each room they passed was a graveyard of shattered equipment, the remnants of an evil that had long since been quelled. But as they turned a corner, they stumbled upon something unexpected. A large chamber, bathed in an eerie blue light. In the center stood a massive device, pulsating with energy, connected to a series of monitors displaying data streams. What the hell is that? Natasha whispered, stepping closer. Looks like some kind of temporal generator, Tony deduced, his eyes widening. This could be how Kang manipulates time. We need to destroy it before he can use it. But before they could act, the alarms blared to life, piercing the silence with their shrill cries. The lights flickered, casting ominous shadows around the chamber. Of course, Clint groaned. Just once I'd like to break into a place without triggering the alarms. Move, Steve shouted, urgency flooding his voice. We need to get to the generator and take it out. They rushed toward the device, but as they neared, a chilling laugh echoed through the chamber, sending shivers down their spines. You think you can destroy my work? Kang's voice reverberated around them, mocking and sinister. From the shadows, Kang materialized, a smug grin on his face. He stepped forward, radiating an aura of power that seemed to warp reality around him. You've walked into my trap once again. Your ignorance is truly delightful. Not this time, Kang. Tony shot back, preparing his suit's weapons. We're taking you down. Kang raised an eyebrow, unfazed. You misunderstand. You're not here to take me down. You're here to witness your own demise. With a flick of his wrist, the device roared to life, sending waves of energy surging through the chamber. The air crackled with power, and the room shifted as if caught between dimensions. It was disorienting, and Steve felt his senses spiral. Stay together, he shouted, but it was too late. The energy pulsed, and before he could react, the ground beneath them shook violently. Wanda! Natasha cried out, her voice strained. We need cover. Wanda summoned her powers, creating a barrier that shielded them from the blast. But the energy continued to swell, intensifying with each passing second. Clint, get to that generator, Steve commanded, urgency overriding his fear. Clint nodded, darting toward the device as Kang's laughter echoed around them. You're too late, Avengers. I'm bending time itself to my will. You're nothing but echoes in my grand design. As Clint reached the generator, he began to fire arrows at the intricate machinery, but they disintegrated upon contact with the energy field. It's protected. I can't get through. Then we have to overload it. Tony yelled, his mind racing. Wanda, can you disrupt the energy flow? I'll try, she responded, focusing her powers. She extended her hands toward the generator, weaving spells that fought against the pulsating energy. But Kang only laughed harder, the sound reverberating through the chamber. You think you can disrupt what I have created. You're merely prolonging the inevitable. As the energy surged higher, Steve felt the pressure closing in. We have to. Do this now. Natasha, cover us. Natasha drew her weapons, firing at Kang, but he easily sidestepped, his form shifting like smoke. He was toying with them, dancing between their attacks as if they were mere distractions. Your skills are impressive, but they won't save you, Kang taunted, flicking his fingers. A wave of energy shot out, striking Clint and sending him sprawling back against the wall. Clint! Steve shouted, turning his focus toward his fallen teammate. But the distraction proved costly. Kang's energy struck him next, knocking him off his feet. Enough of this. Tony roared, activating his repulsor beams. I won't let you take us down. He fired at Kang, who merely raised a hand, absorbing the energy with a smug grin. You don't understand. I am beyond your capabilities. I exist outside your timeline. Wanda gritted her teeth, summoning her powers with all her might. We're not done yet. We can't let him win. As she intensified her focus, the energy shifted in the room. She felt the threads of reality unraveling, and with a final push, she screamed, Now! The chamber erupted with blinding light as Wanda's powers clashed with the generator's energy. The force shook the very foundation of the facility, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though time itself had frozen. But in that moment of chaos, Kang's eyes darkened with rage. You dare challenge me? With a powerful blast, he retaliated, but the combination of Wanda's magic and Tony's technology disrupted the generator's flow, causing it to overload. The air crackled, and a massive explosion tore through the chamber, sending shockwaves that rattled their bones. The force of the blast threw everyone to the ground, darkness swallowing the room. Time fractured, reality bending and twisting around them. As the dust settled, silence enveloped the chamber, a haunting stillness that felt like the calm before a storm. When Steve finally regained consciousness, the scene before him was one of devastation. The chamber lay in ruins, remnants of the generator scattered across the floor. He blinked, disoriented, as he searched for his teammates. Wanda! Clint! Natasha! He called, his voice hoarse. Here! Clint's voice came from nearby, strained but alive. He pushed himself up, wincing from the impact. I'm okay, barely. Natasha crawled over the debris, shaking off the dust. I think Wanda's down, but she's breathing. Steve rushed to Wanda's side, where she lay amidst the rubble. Wanda, can you hear me? He asked, concern etched on his face. With a pained groan, she opened her eyes, struggling to sit up. I'm all right. Just need a moment. Tony staggered to his feet, his suit damaged but still functional. Where's Kang? He demanded, scanning the wreckage for any sign of their enemy. He was here, Clint said, eyes narrowed in frustration. But it looks like he escaped. Of course he did, Natasha replied, anger simmering just below the surface. He was toying with us the whole time. As they gathered around Wanda, she took a deep breath, shaking off the fatigue. We need to regroup. We've only delayed him. He's still out there, and we can't afford to let our guard down. Steve nodded, his determination renewed. Then we'll find him. We'll track him down and finish this once and for all. With newfound resolve, the Avengers began to piece themselves together, their unity stronger than ever in the face of adversity. They may have lost the battle, but the war was far from over. The threat of Kang loomed larger than ever, and they would not let their fractured alliance shatter under the weight of his darkness. The fight for their world, and for their lives, had just begun. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. Avengers Tower stood tall against the skyline, a monument of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with tension as the team regrouped, the silence punctuated only by the occasional hum of technology and the faint sounds of the city below. They had survived the explosion, but the threat of Kang still loomed over them like a dark cloud, and the team knew they couldn't afford to waste time. Tony Stark sat at the central console, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface as he sifted through data from the destroyed Hydra facility. The air was thick with unease, and his mind raced with possibilities. "I'm running a full analysis on the temporal energy we encountered," he said, glancing up at the others. "If Kang was using that generator, it's possible he left traces we can follow. Can we track him?" Steve asked, his arms crossed over his chest, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. "Not from the debris alone," Tony replied, shaking his head. "But I can cross-reference this with known locations he might use as bases. We know he's been operating out of the shadows, and we need to predict his next move." "Then let's get to work," Natasha urged, her voice steady. "We need to stay ahead of him. If he's using time travel, we can't let him manipulate events before we can intervene." As they delved deeper into the analysis, Wanda leaned against the wall, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I felt something strange when the generator exploded. It wasn't just energy, it felt like echoes of the past." "Echoes?" Clint asked, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "There was a connection to previous events, moments in time," Wanda explained, her eyes distant as she recalled the sensation. "It's as if the generator was not only manipulating time, but also drawing on past energies. I felt remnants of battles, of people lost. It's like Kang is using our history against us." Steve's expression hardened. "If he's tapping into our past, we need to find out how. We can't let him weaponize our memories." "Then let's focus on his patterns," Tony suggested, his tone shifting to one of determination. "I'll compile data from every encounter we've had with him. Look for any links to the locations where he might strike next." As the team worked in concert, the weight of their shared history hung heavily in the air. Each Avenger carried their own burdens, their pasts intertwining with the present as they fought against a foe who thrived on their failures. Hours passed, the tension palpable as they pieced together clues from their encounters with Kang. Tony worked tirelessly at the console, pulling up maps, locations, and energy readings. "All right, I've identified several sites where he's been active," he announced finally. "If we can anticipate his moves, we can set up a counter-strategy." Steve stepped closer, studying the holographic display. "What do you suggest?" "We divide and conquer," Tony replied. "We'll send teams to each potential location. We need to flush him out, force him to make a mistake." "Sounds good in theory," Clint said, "but we need to be careful. If we spread ourselves too thin, we could walk into another trap." "Agreed," Natasha chimed in. "We have to keep communication lines open. If anything goes wrong, we need to be able to regroup." As they strategized, Wanda remained quiet, lost in thought. She was acutely aware of the shadows of her past, the memories of loss and struggle that Kang could exploit. Her powers were a double-edged sword, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he would seek to use her vulnerabilities against her. "Wanda!" Steve's voice broke through her thoughts, concern etched on his face. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she replied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about our past encounters. We've faced worse before, haven't we?" "Yeah, but this is different," Clint said, leaning back in his chair. "Kang isn't just a physical threat, he's psychological. He knows how to manipulate us, to exploit our weaknesses." Natasha nodded. "We need to be vigilant. If he tries to play mind games, we have to stand firm. We've come too far to let him tear us apart now." As the conversation shifted to their plans, Wanda felt a chill run down her spine. The echoes she had sensed before haunted her, reminding her of the battles they had fought and the friends they had lost. Kang was a master of time, and if he could tap into their past, he could manipulate their emotions and turn their greatest fears against them. "We're ready," Tony said, breaking the silence. "Let's get this done." The Avengers prepared to split into teams, each member steeling themselves for the challenges ahead. As they gathered their gear, Wanda's mind raced with possibilities, the weight of her past pressing down on her. The first target was an old military base in the outskirts of New York, rumored to have remnants of advanced technology that Kang could potentially exploit. As they boarded the Quinjet, the tension in the cabin was palpable, each Avenger acutely aware of the stakes. "Let's keep our eyes peeled for anything unusual," Clint said, his bow at the ready. "Kang could be anywhere. I'll scan for energy signatures as we approach," Tony added, his suit humming with power. "If he's here, we'll know." As they soared through the skies, Wanda gazed out the window, lost in thought. Memories flooded her mind, of battles fought, sacrifices made, and the faces of those they had lost. She felt the familiar pang of grief, a reminder of her own vulnerabilities. Kang's influence could tear at those wounds, and she had to be prepared. The Quinjet landed smoothly on the base's tarmac, the engines winding down as they disembarked. The air was heavy with the scent of rust and decay, the remnants of a bygone era. The facility stood before them, its walls battered and worn, a ghost of its former glory. "Stay alert," Steve instructed, his voice low as they made their way inside. "We don't know what we're walking into." As they navigated the dimly lit corridors, Tony activated his suit's sensors, scanning for any signs of Kang's presence. The atmosphere felt oppressive, the weight of history hanging in the air. "Looks clear so far," Tony reported, but his voice held an edge of caution. "Let's keep moving." As they ventured deeper into the base, the walls began to shift, shadows dancing as the lights flickered. The air felt charged, almost electric, as if something was stirring beneath the surface. Wanda's instincts kicked in. "We need to be careful. I can sense something powerful." Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled beneath them, and a flash of light erupted from the far end of the corridor. A portal opened, revealing Kang, his figure shrouded in darkness. He stepped through, a predatory grin on his face, eyes glinting with malice. "Welcome, Avengers," he sneered, the darkness swirling around him. "I've been expecting you." "Stop right there, Kang," Steve shouted, his voice steady despite the tension. "This ends now." "Oh, but you misunderstand," Kang replied, his tone mocking. "This is just the beginning." With a wave of his hand, the ground shifted, and tendrils of energy erupted from the walls, wrapping around the Avengers like serpents. "Get ready," Tony shouted, activating his repulsors as he aimed at the tendrils. "We have to break free." The energy constricted, tightening its grip as they struggled against it. Clint fired arrows at the tendrils, but they disintegrated upon contact. "Wanda," Steve called out, desperation in his voice. "We need you." With a surge of determination, Wanda tapped into her powers, conjuring a barrier of energy that pushed against the tendrils. "I can hold them back, but we have to move." "Tony, help her," Clint yelled, launching himself forward to free Steve from the binding energy. As Tony focused his energy on the barrier, Wanda fought against the waves of darkness. "We have to break through. He's using our fears against us." Kang laughed, the sound echoing around them. "You think you can overcome your past? You are haunted by your failures, and I will use that to my advantage." In a moment of clarity, Wanda remembered her strength. "I won't let you control us," she screamed, channeling her powers into a brilliant flash of light. The tendrils recoiled, and the darkness dissipated, leaving the Avengers momentarily stunned. "Now!" Steve shouted, rallying them together. "We push forward." They charged toward Kang, determination fueling their every move. But he merely smirked, raising his hands as a vortex of energy formed around him. "You think you can defeat me?" he taunted, his voice a low growl. "I am the master of time, and you are nothing but fleeting moments." Wanda unleashed a wave of energy, colliding with the vortex, creating an explosion that shook the entire facility. The force sent them tumbling back, but they quickly regained their footing. "Focus," Natasha called, firing her weapons at Kang, but he absorbed their attacks, a twisted smile on his face. "You're playing right into my hands. Your unity will be your downfall." As the battle raged on, the room shifted, reality warping. Around them, memories flooded back, visions of past battles, the faces of fallen friends. The shadows of their pasts clawed at them, trying to pull them under. Clint struggled against the memories, shaking his head. No, we can't let him win. Fight it, Steve urged, his voice cutting through the chaos. We are stronger together. Remember why we fight. With renewed strength, the Avengers pushed through the darkness, their bonds pulling them back from the brink. Wanda's magic surged, intertwining with Tony's technology as they created a barrier against Kang's influence. Together, Tony shouted, his repulsors glowing brightly. Let's finish this. The combined force of their powers collided with Kang's vortex, creating a blinding explosion that shook the very foundations of the base. In that moment of chaos, they surged forward, united against their common enemy. But Kang was ready, his eyes flashing with anger. You will pay for this insolence. With a wave of his hand, he summoned a storm of energy that erupted around them, threatening to consume them in darkness. We can't let him trap us, Natasha yelled, her voice fierce as she pressed forward. Wanda closed her eyes, summoning every ounce of her power. I won't let you take us, she cried, channeling her magic into a radiant burst that illuminated the room. In that moment of clarity, they felt the bonds of their past, their losses, their victories, their shared humanity, binding them together as one. They would not let Kang shatter their resolve. With a final surge of power, Wanda and Tony combined their energies, creating a massive wave of light that crashed against Kang's storm. The two forces collided, the explosion reverberating through the air as the darkness began to falter. No! Kang shouted, his voice filled with fury as he felt his grip slipping. With one last push, the Avengers launched forward, breaking through the shadows of their past and striking Kang with the full force of their unity. The energy of their collective will shattered the darkness, sending Kang reeling back as the light consumed him. Together, Steve shouted, their voices echoing in unison as they fought against the remnants of Kang's power. With a final, brilliant flash, Kang was engulfed in the light, his form dissipating as the darkness that had threatened to engulf them shattered into fragments. Silence fell, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as they stood together, victorious. But the battle was far from over. The echoes of their past would linger, and Kang's influence would not be easily forgotten. They would face the consequences of their choices and the shadows that threatened to haunt them. As they regrouped, the reality of their situation settled in. They had won this battle, but the war against Kang, and the darkness within themselves, had only just begun. Chapter 6. The Price of Power. In the aftermath of their battle with Kang, the Avengers found themselves back at Avengers Tower, the mood somber despite their recent victory. The once vibrant discussions about strategy and plans had shifted to hushed conversations, the weight of their experiences pressing heavily on them. Each member carried the scars of their confrontation, both visible and invisible. Wanda stood by the window, staring out at the sprawling city beneath them. The skyline was a reminder of the world they fought to protect, yet it also served as a stark reminder of their vulnerabilities. The echoes of Kang's power still reverberated in her mind, and she felt the pull of her past more strongly than ever. Wanda, Natasha's voice broke through her thoughts. Are you okay? Wanda turned, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm fine. Just reflecting. Reflecting or brooding? Natasha asked, crossing her arms. You know you can talk to us about anything. It's just Kang's manipulation, Wanda admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He knew our fears, our regrets. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into my own darkness. Natasha stepped closer, concern etched on her face. We all felt it. He wanted to tear us apart, to make us doubt ourselves. But we stood together. Did we? Wanda replied, her tone tinged with uncertainty. We fought him, but the memories he brought back, they linger. I can still feel them. Wanda, Natasha said firmly, we've all lost people. We've all had our share of darkness. But it's how we fight back that defines us. We're not the same people we were before. We're stronger now. Is strength enough? Wanda questioned, her gaze drifting back to the city. What if we face him again? What if next time we're not so lucky? Next time we'll be ready, Natasha reassured her. We'll learn from this. We have to. As Wanda absorbed Natasha's words, Tony entered the room, his expression serious as he held a holographic tablet. We need to talk strategy. The encounter with Kang exposed a lot of vulnerabilities, and we need to address them before he strikes again. Any leads? Steve asked, joining them as he walked in from the adjacent room. I've been digging into Kang's history and tactics, Tony replied, swiping through the data on the screen. He's unpredictable, which makes him dangerous. But there's a pattern. He targets locations and people with historical significance to our team. Places tied to our past. Are you saying he's going to strike at places that remind us of our losses? Clint interjected, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Exactly, Tony confirmed, nodding. We have to anticipate his moves. If we can predict where he'll attack, we can set traps of our own. Or protect those places, Steve added, a sense of urgency creeping into his voice. We can't let him manipulate our history. We have to turn the tables. Let's brainstorm, Natasha suggested. Where do we start? Tony brought up a holographic map of New York, highlighting significant locations. The site of previous battles, lost comrades, and places where they had suffered personal losses. Here, he pointed, is where we faced Ultron. And this is the site of the Battle of New York. He could hit either of these places, trying to draw us out or exploit our memories. As they discussed potential strategies, Wanda's mind wandered back to the depths of Kang's manipulation. She had glimpsed the darkness that lay within herself, and she felt it beckoning her. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus on the present. Wanda. Steve's voice cut through her reverie once more. What do you think? Startled, she looked up to find all eyes on her. I think we need to protect these places. But we should also create distractions. If we can draw Kang's attention away from the vulnerable points, we stand a better chance. Agreed, Tony said, tapping the map again. We can set up decoys or even lure him into a trap somewhere else. But we need to coordinate. I can help with the illusions, Wanda offered, her determination rising. If we can create convincing images or scenes from our past, it could confuse him. Good thinking, Clint replied, the corners of his mouth lifting in approval. Let's put our heads together and come up with a plan. As they worked late into the night, their spirits began to lift. The shared camaraderie reminded them of the strength they derived from one another, and they slowly pushed aside the weight of their doubts. Each member brought their unique skills to the table, and together, they devised a multifaceted strategy aimed at outmaneuvering Kang. As the first rays of dawn broke through the skyline, they concluded their planning session. All right, Steve said, addressing the group. We have our plan. Let's execute it flawlessly. But as they prepared to leave, a low rumble shook the tower, causing the lights to flicker. What the hell was that? Clint exclaimed, instinctively reaching for his bow. Tony's eyes narrowed, and he rushed to the console, checking the readings. It's coming from downtown. There's a massive energy spike. It's Kang. The Avengers exchanged quick glances, their earlier resolve solidifying into action. We have to move, Steve shouted, already heading for the exit. Avengers, assemble. The Quinjet soared through the sky, racing toward the source of the disturbance. The cityscape below them unfolded like a living map, each building a testament to the struggles they had faced. But now, as they approached the center of the chaos, that sense of determination transformed into urgency. What do we know? Natasha asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I'm detecting a powerful energy source, Tony replied, his gaze locked on the readings. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. Kang's definitely behind this. As they neared the epicenter, the sight that greeted them was one of devastation. The streets were in chaos, people running in every direction, their screams echoing through the air. A swirling vortex of energy loomed above, pulsating with dark power. There! Clint shouted, pointing at a figure standing in the eye of the storm. Kang stood tall, his presence commanding as he drew power from the chaos around him. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and the ground trembled beneath him. Prepare for landing, Steve commanded, taking charge. We can't let him harness that energy. The Quinjet descended swiftly, and as they disembarked, the team sprang into action. Kang's voice boomed above the cacophony, taunting them. You think you can stop me? You are nothing but relics of a forgotten past. With a wave of his hand, he sent a wave of energy crashing toward them. The Avengers scattered, narrowly avoiding the onslaught. Stick together, Tony shouted, firing his repulsors at Kang. The blasts collided with the vortex, but the energy simply absorbed them. Your technology is useless against me, Kang mocked, his laughter echoing through the chaos. I am beyond your understanding. Wanda gritted her teeth, channeling her powers. We can't let him overwhelm us. We have to push back. As the team regrouped, they quickly assessed their options. The energy surrounding Kang was growing stronger, feeding off the chaos he had created. Tony, can you disrupt that energy? Steve asked, formulating a plan. I'll do my best, Tony replied, adjusting his suit's settings. But I need time. He's pulling power from the chaos. Wanda, can you create a distraction? Natasha suggested, glancing at her. Draw his focus away from Tony. I can try, Wanda agreed, determination flooding her voice. But I'll need to get close. Let's move, Steve ordered, charging toward Kang with Clint and Natasha flanking him. As they approached, Kang unleashed another wave of energy, but Wanda was ready. She stepped forward, summoning her powers as she created a series of illusions, phantoms of their past, memories that flickered and danced around Kang, drawing his attention. The ghosts of lost battles and faces filled the air, swirling around him in a cacophony of emotion. Look at them. Kang sneered, momentarily distracted by the haunting images. You think you can haunt me with the shadows of your past? Now, Tony, Steve shouted, taking advantage of the distraction. With the energy diverted, Tony focused his repulsors on the vortex, unleashing a barrage of blasts that tore through the chaos. I'm channeling everything I've got, he called out, pouring his energy into the assault. As the blasts collided with the vortex, it began to destabilize, the energy swirling chaotically. Kang's eyes widened in realization, and he snarled in anger. No, you cannot defeat me. Together, Steve urged, rallying his team. Push through. The Avengers surged forward, each of them channeling their strengths. Wanda intensified her illusions, surrounding Kang with memories that threatened to overwhelm him. The weight of the past bore down upon him, and for the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. As they pressed the attack, the vortex continued to fracture, and Kang struggled to maintain control. You think you can hold me here? You will pay for this insolence. With a final effort, Wanda directed her magic to bind him, wrapping him in a cocoon of shimmering energy. We won't let you go. Now, Clint, Steve shouted, signaling him to take the shot. Clint aimed carefully, his heart racing. You got it. With a swift motion, he released an arrow that soared through the air, striking the center of the vortex. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the energy field, causing it to destabilize even further. Kang's form flickered, his power wavering as he struggled against the bonds of their combined forces. Feel the weight of your past, Wanda cried, pouring her energy into the binding spell. You can't escape this. With one final push, the energy shattered, and Kang was engulfed in a blinding light. His screams echoed through the streets as the power he had harnessed imploded, the darkness consuming him. When the light faded, Kang was gone, leaving behind an eerie silence. The swirling energy dissipated, and the chaos around them began to calm. The Avengers stood together, breathless and battered, but victorious. We did it, Natasha said, disbelief creeping into her voice. Not without a price, Tony replied, glancing at the destruction around them. We need to ensure he doesn't come back. As they regrouped, the realization of their narrow escape settled in. The battle had been won, but the shadows of their past lingered in their minds, reminding them of the darkness they had faced. Next time we'll be ready, Steve said, determination in his voice. We can't let fear control us. We'll face whatever comes together. Wanda nodded, feeling the weight of their experiences. Together, she echoed, her heart swelling with hope amid the uncertainty. As the sun rose over the city, casting a golden light upon the ruins, the Avengers stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had emerged stronger from the darkness, their bonds fortified by the battles they had fought. But they knew the war was far from over, and they would face the shadows of their past head-on. Chapter 7. The Fractured Alliances. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a crimson hue across the skyline, the Avengers regrouped at Avengers Tower, the weight of their recent victory settling heavily upon their shoulders. They had pushed back Kang, for now, but the cost of their triumph loomed large, casting shadows that threatened to fracture their unity. The conference room buzzed with a tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud. The once familiar faces now wore expressions of worry and uncertainty, each grappling with their own demons in the wake of the battle. Tony sat at the head of the table, scrolling through data on his tablet, trying to make sense of the chaos that had just unfolded. All right, team, Tony began, his voice steady but tinged with fatigue. We've bought ourselves some time, but Kang isn't finished with us. We need to figure out how to prevent him from coming back. Wanda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The memories of the battle with Kang still haunted her, a constant reminder of the darkness she had faced. But how? He's always one step ahead. We barely managed to contain him this time. True, Natasha interjected, her arms crossed as she leaned back in her chair. But if we can predict his moves, we can set traps. We need to understand his motives better. What drives him? Control, Clint said, breaking his silence. Kang wants to dominate time, manipulate history. He thrives on chaos and fear. And if he knows we're onto him, he'll adapt, Tony replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. We can't afford to play into his hands. We have to change our approach. Steve, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. What if we go on the offensive? We could try to find the temporal nexus he's been using. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to weaken him. That's a risky move, Natasha cautioned. We don't know what we're dealing with. We could end up walking right into a trap. We can't keep playing defense, Steve countered, his voice firm. Every time we react to his moves, we're giving him the upper hand. It's time to take control of the narrative. Wanda felt the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. But what if we can't contain it? What if it backfires? Then we'll deal with it, Tony said, his tone resolute. We've faced worse odds before. But we need to be smart about this. We can't let fear dictate our choices. As discussions continued, the tension in the room grew palpable. Each member of the team felt the strain of the past, their experiences and losses bubbling beneath the surface. They had survived a war, but now they faced a different kind of battle, the struggle for their unity and trust in one another. Suddenly, the doors swung open, and Sam Wilson stepped into the room, a serious expression on his face. I just got off the line with some of our contacts. There's been a spike in temporal disturbances all over the globe. It looks like Kang is trying to manipulate timelines to his advantage. Damn it, Tony muttered, running a hand through his hair. If he's creating alternate realities or timelines, we need to find out where he's focusing his efforts. We could split up, Clint suggested. Each of us could take a region and investigate. If we find the source of the disturbances, we can converge and contain him. Steve nodded, his gaze unwavering. That's a solid plan. But we have to be careful. We can't let him lure us into isolated pockets where he can take us out one by one. Agreed, Natasha replied. We'll coordinate through secure channels. Let's get to work. The team sprang into action, each member feeling the weight of the mission ahead. As they prepared to split up, Wanda hesitated, her heart heavy with the prospect of facing Kang's influence again. She turned to Steve, seeking reassurance. What if we can't hold the timelines? What if Kang creates something that can't be undone? We'll find a way, Steve promised, his voice steady. We're the Avengers. We've faced impossible odds before, and we've come through stronger. Trust in each other, Wanda. With a deep breath, she nodded, steeling herself for the battle ahead. They had fought together, and they would do so again. Each member of the team would play a crucial role in the fight against Kang, but the emotional toll weighed heavily on all of them. As they prepared to depart, Natasha pulled Wanda aside. Hey, you okay? She asked, concern etched on her face. I'm just scared, Wanda admitted, her vulnerability surfacing. Kang knows how to exploit our fears, and I can't help but think what would happen if I lose control again. Wanda, you're stronger than you realize, Natasha reassured her. We all have our doubts, but we've faced the darkness and come out the other side. Just remember, you're not alone in this. With a nod, Wanda took a deep breath and joined the others, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They split into teams, each heading to different locations across the globe, each member acutely aware of the dangers that awaited them. The sun was high in the sky when Steve and Clint arrived in a bustling city known for its historical significance, a place Kang had targeted before. They moved cautiously through the streets, their senses heightened as they scanned for any signs of temporal disturbances. This place feels off, Clint remarked, glancing around at the hurried pedestrians. Like something's not quite right. Agreed, Steve replied, his gaze sharp. We need to stick together and keep a low profile. Let's head to the archives. If there are any disturbances, they'll likely show up there. As they made their way to the archives, the air thickened with tension. They pushed through the heavy doors and entered a dimly lit room filled with dusty tomes and ancient artifacts. The atmosphere felt heavy, as if the very walls were steeped in history. Stay alert, Steve warned, scanning the room for any signs of danger. Kang could be anywhere. Suddenly, a flicker of energy surged through the air, causing the lights to flicker ominously. What was that? Clint asked, instinctively reaching for his bow. I don't know, Steve replied, his heart racing. But we need to find out. As they moved deeper into the archives, they discovered a series of scrolls laid out on a table. Steve approached cautiously, his eyes narrowing as he studied the symbols. These look like records of past events, but they're different. Altered. Like Kang's been messing with time, Clint speculated, his brow furrowing. He's rewriting history. Exactly, Steve said, piecing together the implications. If he can manipulate these records, he can alter how we perceive our past, our failures. He wants to use it against us. A loud crash echoed through the archives, and the duo exchanged quick glances. We need to move, Steve urged, sprinting toward the source of the noise. They burst through a doorway, only to find themselves face to face with a group of armored soldiers, Kang's elite enforcers, their eyes glowing with unnatural energy. Looks like we found the welcoming committee, Clint muttered, notching an arrow. Stay focused, Steve instructed, his instincts kicking in. We have to take them down quickly. The first wave of enforcers charged, and Steve leaped into action, delivering powerful punches that sent the first soldier crashing into a nearby bookshelf. Clint let loose arrows, each one striking true, incapacitating the enemies with precision. But more soldiers continued to pour in, their numbers overwhelming. We can't keep this up forever, Clint shouted, firing another arrow. We need to find a way out. Back to the entrance, Steve commanded, pushing through the chaos. They fought their way toward the exit, each blow resonating with the urgency of their situation. As they neared the door, a powerful wave of energy surged, knocking them both to the ground. Steve struggled to regain his footing as the world around him warped, and he realized Kang was manipulating reality itself. Clint, hold on, he yelled, desperately trying to make sense of the shifting landscape. Do you see that? Clint shouted, pointing to a shimmer in the air, a portal that flickered ominously, distorting their surroundings. We have to get to it, Steve urged, pushing forward as they fought their way through the enforcers. Each strike felt like a race against time, the energy of the portal pulling them in with an irresistible force. With a final surge of strength, they reached the portal and dove through, the sensation of being ripped apart and reformed overwhelming them. As they landed, they found themselves in a different time, an alternate version of the city, twisted and dark. What just happened? Clint gasped, looking around at the warped streets, the sky tinted a sickly green. I think we've entered one of Kang's alternate realities, Steve said, his voice heavy with realization. We need to find a way back. But as they scanned their surroundings, a chilling figure appeared before them. A twisted version of themselves, dark and malevolent. Welcome, Avengers, the doppelganger sneered. You've wandered into a world where your failures define you. Who are you? Clint demanded, pulling back his bow. I am what you fear, the figure taunted, stepping closer. The darkness you hide from. The choices you regret. Here, I am your truth. Before they could react, the doppelganger lunged, the air crackling with dark energy. Steve barely managed to dodge, countering with a punch that sent the figure staggering back. Stay focused, he shouted to Clint. We can't let him get in our heads. The battle that followed was a chaotic clash of wills, each punch and arrow representing their struggle against their own insecurities. The doppelganger mirrored their every move, pushing them to their limits as they fought against not only the enemy but their own fears. This is all in your mind, Steve roared, determination fueling his strikes. We're stronger than this. Clint fired another arrow, catching the figure off guard. We won't let you define us. With a final surge of energy, they combined their efforts, striking the doppelganger simultaneously. The dark figure writhed in agony before shattering into a cascade of energy, dissipating into the air. Breathing heavily, Steve and Clint stood amidst the aftermath, their hearts racing. Did we do it? Clint asked, scanning the area for any signs of danger. I think so, Steve replied, still feeling the remnants of the fight linger in the air. But we can't let our guard down. We need to find a way back to our timeline. They began searching for a way to navigate the alternate reality, the echoes of their battle still resonating in their minds. With each step, they realized the struggle ahead was not just against Kang, but against the very doubts that had plagued them throughout their journey. Meanwhile, Wanda, Natasha, and Sam were confronting their own challenges. They had landed in an alternate version of New York City, where chaos reigned and familiar faces became twisted and dark. As they navigated the streets, they encountered a group of twisted versions of their former allies. Heroes corrupted by Kang's influence, their powers turned against them. Why are we even here? Wanda demanded, her frustration boiling over. This isn't our fight. Look closer, Natasha urged, pointing to the chaotic scene. These aren't just random versions. They represent what could happen if we fail. Wanda felt a chill run down her spine as she recognized the implications. We can't let this happen. We need to find a way to stop Kang before it's too late. Suddenly, they were ambushed by their twisted counterparts, dark reflections of themselves, embodying their worst fears. Natasha confronted a malevolent version of herself, her every move mirrored by the twisted figure. "Is this who you really are?" the doppelganger taunted, her voice dripping with malice. "A shadow of doubt, afraid to embrace your true power?" Natasha's resolve hardened. "No, I am not afraid of who I am." With fierce determination, she launched into battle, the clash of their abilities creating shockwaves that reverberated through the streets. The fight was brutal, each punch fueled by the pain of past choices. Meanwhile, Wanda faced her own darkness, an embodiment of her grief and anger. "You think you can control me?" the dark figure sneered. "You've lost everything, and you're still not strong enough." "Watch me," Wanda replied, her power surging. She unleashed a torrent of magic, fighting not just the doppelganger but the insecurities that threatened to overwhelm her. The battle raged on, each woman determined to reclaim their identity, to stand against the darkness that sought to consume them. And as they fought, the bonds of their friendship and resilience grew stronger, pushing them to new heights. Sam, caught in the chaos, fought his own reflection, an image of self-doubt plagued by the weight of his past. "You're not real," he shouted, his voice echoing through the turmoil. "I've faced worse than you." With every strike, he confronted his fears, the truth of his journey empowering him. The darkness began to fade as he fought not just for himself, but for his teammates, for the future they were trying to protect. As the last of the twisted figures shattered into fragments, the three heroes stood together, breathless but resolute. "We need to find our way back," Sam urged, glancing around at the devastated city. "Kang can't be allowed to win." "Agreed," Natasha replied, determination etched on her face. "We have to regroup with Steve and Clint." Just as they turned to leave, a familiar shimmer in the air caught their attention, a portal opening before them, offering a glimpse of their reality. "Let's go," Wanda urged, rushing toward the portal, her heart racing with anticipation. They stepped through, the sensation of reality shifting around them, and emerged back in their timeline, Avengers Tower. They regrouped with Steve and Clint, each team sharing their harrowing experiences. The weight of their battles settled heavily in the room, but their resolve was stronger than ever. "We've faced our fears," Steve said, looking each of them in the eye. "But Kang is still out there, and we need to prepare for what's coming. We need to find his temporal nexus," Tony added, his voice firm. "If we can disrupt his control over time, we might finally put an end to this." As the Avengers set their course, they knew the battle ahead would not only test their strength but their unity. They had faced their darkest fears and emerged stronger, but Kang's influence loomed large, a shadow threatening to engulf them once again. With determination in their hearts, they prepared to confront the darkness, ready to fight for their future and the fate of the world. They would not let Kang redefine who they were. They would stand together, unbreakable against the tide of chaos. Chapter 8. The Timekeeper's Gambit. The atmosphere in Avengers Tower crackled with tension as the team convened in the conference room once more. They had regrouped, shared their harrowing experiences from the alternate realities, and now faced the daunting task of confronting Kang once and for all. The weight of their encounters lingered, each member grappling with the shadows of their past and the uncertain future ahead. Tony stood at the head of the table, his holographic display flickering with images of time fractures and anomalies detected across the globe. "We've pinpointed several locations where Kang is actively manipulating time," he explained, his voice steady yet charged with urgency. "These disturbances suggest he's trying to create a nexus, a central point from which he can control multiple timelines. We need to find this nexus and neutralize it before he can fully harness its power," Steve added, glancing around the room at his fellow Avengers. "It's our only chance to stop him for good." "Which locations are the highest priority?" Natasha asked, her arms crossed, her expression focused. Tony swiped through the hologram, highlighting 3 critical points: a hidden temple in the jungles of South America, an abandoned facility in the Arctic, and a bustling city in Asia that had recently experienced strange temporal fluctuations. We split into teams. Each team will investigate one of these sites. We need to disrupt Kang's control before it spirals out of hand. "Do we have any intel on what to expect at these locations?" Clint inquired, his brow furrowing with concern. "Limited," Tony replied, his voice grim. "Kang is unpredictable. He could have traps, illusions, or even doppelgangers waiting for us." We'll have to be prepared for anything. We should take the jungle mission, Sam suggested, looking at Steve and Natasha. The dense foliage and ancient ruins might offer some concealment. Plus, we might find something useful in the temple's history. I agree, Steve nodded. Clint, Wanda, and Tony should tackle the Arctic facility. The extreme conditions might work to your advantage. You can use stealth. What about me? Natasha asked, raising an eyebrow. I can't just sit back. Your skills would be invaluable in the city, Tony replied, meeting her gaze. You can blend in, gather intel on Kang's movements. We'll need you to keep us informed. Fine, but I'm not going to just sit back. I'll set up surveillance, Natasha conceded, her determination unwavering. With their plan in place, the Avengers quickly prepped for their respective missions. Tensions ran high as they donned their gear, the gravity of their task weighing heavily on their hearts. They understood the risks involved. They had seen what Kang was capable of, and the darkness he could unleash. As they boarded their Quinjet, Steve took a moment to address the team, his voice resolute. We've faced unimaginable odds before, and each time we've come out stronger. This is no different. Remember what we're fighting for and trust in each other. Together, Clint echoed, glancing at Wanda and Tony, a shared sense of purpose igniting their spirits. The Quinjet roared to life, its engines thrumming as they took off, the sprawling cityscape below fading into the distance. Each team member was lost in thought, steeling themselves for the confrontation ahead. The jungle was a tapestry of vibrant greens and earthy browns, the air thick with humidity and the sounds of wildlife echoing through the trees. Steve, Sam, and Natasha navigated the dense underbrush, their senses heightened as they approached the hidden temple that lay deep within the heart of the jungle. Keep your eyes peeled, Steve instructed, leading the way. Kang could have laid traps or sent his enforcers to greet us. As they moved cautiously, Sam's sharp eyes caught a glimmer of something ahead. Over there, he whispered, pointing to a series of ancient stone structures that emerged from the foliage, partially swallowed by vines and roots. They approached the temple, its weathered stones etched with carvings that told stories of a long-lost civilization. This place feels ancient, Natasha remarked, brushing her fingers over the intricate designs. It's as if the history of this place is infused with magic. Or something far darker, Steve added, a sense of foreboding creeping into his gut. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with. As they entered the temple, the air shifted, heavy with the weight of time. Flickering torches illuminated the chamber, revealing murals depicting cosmic battles and celestial beings. This could be a gateway, Sam suggested, his voice low. Kang might be trying to tap into ancient powers. Suddenly, the ground shook, and a low rumble echoed through the chamber. What was that? Natasha asked, her instincts on high alert. Before they could react, a portal opened in the center of the room, swirling with dark energy. From within, a horde of Kang's enforcers poured forth, their eyes glinting with malevolent intent. Prepare for battle, Steve shouted, drawing his shield as the enforcers surged toward them. The fight was chaotic, a whirlwind of fists and weapons clashing against each other. Steve led the charge, using his shield to deflect blows while Sam took to the air, firing blasts from his suit to incapacitate their foes. Natasha moved with lethal grace, striking from the shadows, her agility keeping her one step ahead of the enemy. Keep pushing, Steve yelled, rallying his team as they fought against the onslaught. We can't let them overwhelm us. As the enforcers fell one by one, the energy from the portal grew stronger, threatening to engulf the chamber. We need to close that portal, Sam shouted, dodging a punch and delivering a swift kick to an enforcer's midsection. Natasha glanced around the chamber, searching for anything that could help. There must be a way to disrupt it. Look for anything related to the carvings. Over there, Steve pointed to a stone pedestal adorned with symbols similar to those etched into the walls. If we can activate that, it might help. With a burst of determination, they pushed through the remaining enforcers, making their way to the pedestal. Sam worked quickly, his fingers dancing over the ancient stones as he deciphered the carvings. There's a sequence here, but I can't read it all. Just try something, Natasha urged, delivering a kick to an enforcer who attempted to flank them. Sam nodded, focusing on the symbols. All right, here goes nothing. He pressed his hand against the pedestal, channeling energy into it. The carvings glowed bright, resonating with ancient power. The portal flickered, destabilizing for a brief moment, but the enforcers pressed forward, their numbers unrelenting. Come on, Steve shouted, his voice strained as he fended off an enforcer's attacks. We need to hold them off. Almost there. Sam grunted, sweat beading on his forehead as he fought to maintain the energy flow. With one final push, the pedestal erupted in a burst of light, sending shockwaves through the temple. The portal imploded, drawing the remaining enforcers back into its depths, their screams echoing as they vanished. Breathing heavily, the trio regrouped, their eyes wide with adrenaline. "Did we do it?" Natasha panted, glancing around the chamber. "Yeah, but we need to keep moving," Steve replied, his expression serious. "This was just a distraction. Kang knows we're here." They pressed on deeper into the temple, navigating narrow corridors adorned with more carvings that seemed to pulse with energy. As they moved cautiously, the air grew heavier, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Finally, they reached a grand chamber at the heart of the temple, the walls lined with shimmering crystals that reflected the light like stars in the night sky. In the center stood a massive stone altar, adorned with intricate designs that resonated with power. "This must be the heart of the temple," Sam murmured, awe evident in his voice. "If we can tap into this energy, we might be able to counter Kang's influence." "Let's do it," Steve urged, stepping forward to examine the altar. "We need to harness this power before Kang arrives." As they prepared to activate the altar, a sudden chill filled the chamber, and the shadows deepened, coalescing into a familiar figure, Kang himself, his presence dark and foreboding. "Fools," he sneered, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You think you can stop me here? You have no idea the power you're dealing with." Steve's heart raced as he instinctively stepped in front of Sam and Natasha. "We'll stop you, Kang. You're not going to control time or destroy our reality." "Brave words, Captain," Kang replied, a mocking grin spreading across his face. "But bravery won't save you from what's coming. You're standing on the edge of oblivion." With a wave of his hand, the chamber erupted in a blinding flash of energy, throwing the Avengers back against the walls. They struggled to regain their footing, their senses overwhelmed by the sheer force of Kang's power. "Now, let's see how well you fare in the face of your own fears," Kang taunted, his laughter echoing through the chamber as he unleashed a wave of dark energy. Steve gritted his teeth, focusing on his resolve. "We've faced worse than you," he shouted, pushing through the disorientation. "We fight for each other." Sam and Natasha rallied beside him, their determination igniting in the face of adversity. "Together!" Natasha cried, channeling her own energy as they prepared to counter Kang's assault. The chamber shook with their clash, the struggle becoming a chaotic symphony of light and darkness. Steve hurled his shield, deflecting Kang's energy back at him, while Sam soared into the air, firing blasts that struck with precision. But Kang was relentless, conjuring illusions that warped their perception of reality. The shadows danced around them, morphing into their darkest fears, moments of failure, loss, and regret that threatened to pull them under. "Look within yourselves." Kang's voice boomed, laced with malice. "You are defined by your failures, and I will use that to crush you." In that moment, Steve felt the weight of every decision he had made, every life lost, and every sacrifice. Doubt crept in, gnawing at his resolve. But he pushed it aside, remembering the bonds forged with his teammates, the strength they drew from one another. "No," he shouted, rallying his spirit. "We are not defined by our failures. We are stronger together." Sam and Natasha echoed his sentiment, their combined voices cutting through the darkness. With newfound determination, they surged forward, combining their powers in a brilliant display of light that pushed back against Kang's illusions. Kang staggered, momentarily taken aback. "This cannot be," he snarled, his voice cracking as he struggled to maintain control. "Together!" Natasha yelled, channeling her energy into the altar. "Let's finish this." With a united front, the Avengers unleashed their full power, the altar glowing with a brilliant light as they pushed back against Kang's darkness. The energy surged through the chamber, resonating with the temple's ancient magic, creating a ripple effect that shook the very foundations of reality. The light engulfed Kang, his form flickering as he fought against the onslaught. "No, you will not take this from me," he screamed, the darkness around him crumbling as the power of their unity overwhelmed him. With one final surge, the energy converged on Kang, and the chamber erupted in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves through the jungle. As the light faded, the Avengers stood breathless, the altar shimmering with remnants of the battle. "He's gone," Sam panted, glancing around at the now silent chamber. "We did it." "Not just yet," Natasha cautioned, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "Kang may have retreated, but he won't give up easily." "Let's regroup with the others," Steve urged, a sense of urgency washing over him. We need to make sure they're all right and prepare for whatever Kang has planned next. As they navigated back through the temple, their hearts were lighter, bolstered by their triumph over Kang's darkness. But they understood the battle was far from over. The shadows still loomed, and they needed to remain vigilant. Meanwhile, in the Arctic, Tony, Clint, and Wanda stood outside the imposing structure of the abandoned facility, its cold metallic surface glinting ominously in the icy landscape. "This place gives me the creeps," Clint muttered, his gaze sweeping the area. "What exactly are we looking for?" "Any technology or artifacts that could give us insight into Kang's plans," Tony replied, his eyes narrowed in concentration. He wouldn't have built this facility for nothing. As they entered, the atmosphere shifted, the air thick with an unsettling silence. The facility's interior was a labyrinth of steel and glass, illuminated by flickering lights that cast eerie shadows across the walls. Wanda felt a chill run down her spine. "Something's not right," she whispered, her instincts on high alert. "Stay close," Tony said, leading the way through the dimly lit corridors. "We'll find what we need." Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging them into darkness. "What the?" Clint began, but before he could finish, an explosion echoed through the facility, shaking the very foundations. "Move!" Tony shouted, pushing forward as debris rained down around them. They sprinted through the chaos, narrowly avoiding falling chunks of metal as the facility groaned under the strain. "Where's it coming from?" Wanda yelled, her eyes darting around for any sign of danger. "Over there." Clint pointed to a room at the end of the corridor, where strange energy pulsed ominously. "Let's check it out." They reached the door, pushing through the rubble to enter the room. Inside, a massive console hummed with power, the walls lined with screens displaying time anomalies and cosmic disturbances. "Look at this," Tony exclaimed, his eyes wide with realization. "This is a control center for Kang's operations. Can we shut it down?" Wanda asked, scanning the controls frantically. "Let me see what I can do," Tony replied, moving quickly to the console. He began typing furiously, attempting to decipher the complex algorithms. "If I can access the mainframe, I might be able to disrupt his systems." Just then, a blaring alarm echoed through the facility, and the lights returned, illuminating the room in a harsh glare. "He knows we're here," Clint warned, his instincts kicking into overdrive. "Get ready." As if on cue, a squad of Kang's enforcers stormed into the room, their weapons raised and ready. "Stop them," one of the enforcers barked, charging forward. "Get down," Tony shouted, diving behind the console as blaster fire erupted around them. Clint rolled to the side, drawing his bow as Wanda conjured a barrier of energy to protect them. "Keep them off me," Tony yelled, focused on the console. "I need a few more seconds." Clint fired an arrow, striking an enforcer in the shoulder, but more surged forward, their relentless advance pushing them back. Wanda summoned her magic, creating explosive bursts that staggered their opponents, but they kept coming. "Almost there," Tony shouted, his fingers flying over the controls as he hacked into the system. "If I can just—" Suddenly, a powerful blast struck the console, sending sparks flying and throwing Tony back against the wall. "No," he shouted, scrambling back to his feet. "I was so close." Wanda's eyes blazed with determination as she faced the enforcers. "We can't let them overwhelm us." With renewed vigor, she unleashed a wave of magic that sent the enforcers sprawling, clearing a path for Tony to reach the console once more. Clint joined her side, firing arrows with pinpoint accuracy to hold off the remaining attackers. "Tony, we need a way out," Clint called, ducking behind cover to avoid incoming fire. "I'm working on it," Tony grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. "If I can trigger an overload in the system, it might cause a chain reaction." "Do it," Wanda urged, her energy flickering as she maintained the barrier. "We'll hold them off." With a final push, Tony accessed the core of the console, his fingers moving with lightning speed. "Here goes nothing." He triggered the overload, and the facility shook violently, alarms blaring as lights flickered erratically. "Let's move," he yelled, rushing toward the exit with Clint and Wanda close behind. As they sprinted through the facility, the structure began to collapse around them, debris crashing down and blinding flashes of light filling the air. They dodged falling beams and exploded consoles, adrenaline pumping as they raced against time. "Get out! Get out!" Clint shouted, pushing through the chaos as they reached the exit. With one final burst of energy, they leaped from the crumbling structure just as it detonated, sending a shockwave rippling through the snow-covered landscape. They landed hard but rolled to their feet, breathless and wide-eyed. "Did we do it?" Wanda asked, glancing back at the smoking ruins of the facility. "Yeah," Tony replied, his voice filled with relief. "But Kang will be back. We need to regroup and report what we've found." As they made their way back to the Quinjet, they knew that the battle was far from over. They had disrupted one of Kang's operations, but his influence still loomed large, a shadow that threatened to engulf their reality. Back at Avengers Tower, Steve, Sam, and Natasha had returned, their faces pale and weary from the confrontation with Kang. As they gathered in the main room, they exchanged updates, each recounting their encounters and the harrowing battles they had faced. "It's worse than we thought," Steve said, his expression grim. "Kang's power is rooted in ancient energies. If he manages to consolidate his control over time, there's no telling what he could unleash. But we have a chance," Tony interjected, his eyes fierce with determination. "We've disrupted 2 of his key operations. We just need to hit him hard and fast before he can regroup." Natasha stepped forward, her expression unwavering. "What's our next move? We can't let him gain any more ground. We need to locate his main base of operations," Tony replied. "If we can take the fight to him and sever his connection to the temporal nexus, we might stand a chance." "Then let's get to work," Steve said, determination burning in his eyes. "We have to end this before it's too late." With their resolve renewed, the Avengers began strategizing, the weight of their task resting heavily on their shoulders. They understood the risks involved, but together they were unbreakable, ready to face the darkness head-on and protect their reality from Kang's malevolent grasp. As they prepared for the final confrontation, they could feel the storm brewing on the horizon, a battle that would test their limits and forge their destinies in the fires of conflict. The time for action had come, and the fate of their world hung in the balance. Chapter 9. The Siege of Time. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as the Avengers gathered in the command center of their base. The vast array of screens displayed live feeds from reconnaissance drones, highlighting a massive structure hidden within a temporal rift, a fortress emanating energy that crackled like thunder. This was Kang's stronghold, a hub of temporal power that pulsated with menace. "Every second we waste gives him an advantage," Natasha said, her gaze fixed on the screen. "We need to move now." "Agreed," Steve replied, gripping the edge of the table. "We've already disrupted his operations, but he'll be ready for us. We have to hit him hard and fast." Tony nodded, reviewing the data. "If we breach the fortress and disrupt his control over the temporal nexus, we can weaken him significantly. But it won't be easy. His forces will be prepared for an assault." Clint leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Then we need to come in strong." "What's the plan?" "Wanda and I can create a diversion," Tony suggested. "While we keep his forces occupied, the rest of you can infiltrate the main chamber and take out Kang directly. We'll need a way to counter his time manipulation," Sam added, his brow furrowing. "If we get caught in a time loop, we'll be fighting a losing battle." "I can amplify my energy shields," Wanda said. "If we combine our powers, we should be able to counteract his attacks long enough to get to him." "Then it's settled," Steve declared, the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. "We go in together, fight as one, and take Kang down." The Avengers suited up, each member preparing mentally and physically for the battle ahead. As they made their final checks, a sense of unity surged among them. They knew the stakes were high, and the weight of their mission hung heavy in the air, but together they felt invincible. In the heart of Kang's fortress, the atmosphere crackled with energy. Kang stood before a vast array of screens, monitoring the flow of time. His features were taut with concentration as he observed the temporal rifts flickering on the monitors, the threads of destiny weaving in and out of his control. "They come," he murmured, a twisted smile spreading across his face. "Fools, thinking they can challenge me. I will show them the true meaning of power." His enforcers surrounded him, armed with advanced weaponry, their loyalty rooted in fear and ambition. "What are your orders, Kang?" one of them asked, eyes darting to the screens. "Prepare the defenses," Kang commanded, his voice icy, "and unleash the chronoguard. We will crush them before they can reach the nexus." As the fortress began to mobilize, alarms blared, and red lights illuminated the dark corridors. The atmosphere became charged with anticipation, the enforcers taking their positions, ready for the impending assault. In the Quinjet, the Avengers soared toward the fortress, the landscape below rapidly shifting as they neared the temporal rift. "We're approaching the entry point," Tony announced, his hands steady on the controls. "Prepare for landing." "On my mark," Steve said, his heart racing as he felt the weight of responsibility. 3, 2, 1 now. The Quinjet touched down with a thud, skidding to a halt just outside the fortress gates. The team wasted no time, disembarking and scanning their surroundings. An eerie silence enveloped the area, broken only by the distant hum of energy emanating from within. "Let's move," Steve commanded, leading the charge toward the entrance. As they approached the massive doors, they swung open with a mechanical whir, revealing a dimly lit hallway lined with advanced technology. The air buzzed with energy, and the ground vibrated beneath their feet. Suddenly, a swarm of Kang's enforcers charged at them, weapons raised and ready to fire. "Stop them!" one of the enforcers shouted, and the corridor erupted in chaos. "Here they come!" Clint shouted, taking aim and loosing a volley of arrows that struck true, incapacitating several of the attackers. Wanda conjured a barrier of energy, deflecting incoming blaster fire. "We need to push forward," she yelled, her magic flaring as she unleashed a wave of power that sent the enforcers flying. "Sam, get above them," Steve instructed, as the team fought their way deeper into the fortress. Sam spread his wings and soared into the air, providing aerial support while launching energy blasts that exploded upon impact. Natasha moved fluidly, weaving through the chaos, her combat skills on full display as she took down enforcers with swift, precise strikes. "They're not stopping," she shouted, her adrenaline surging as she ducked under a barrage of fire. "We're not backing down," Tony declared, activating his suit's weapon systems. Repulsor blasts fired from his gauntlets, cutting through the advancing enforcers like butter. "Keep pushing," Steve urged, rallying the team as they pressed on, determined to reach the heart of Kang's fortress. Deep within the fortress, Kang watched the battle unfold through the screens, his expression darkening. "Pathetic insects," he growled, his fingers twitching with power. "They will pay dearly for their insolence." He activated the fortress defenses, and the walls began to shimmer with energy. "Release the chronoguard," he commanded, a manic gleam in his eyes. The ground trembled as a massive door slid open, revealing the chronoguard, Kang's most elite warriors, armored in sleek suits that crackled with temporal energy. They marched forward, a formidable force ready to unleash devastation. "Time is mine to command," Kang shouted, the power surging around him. "Let them feel the weight of my wrath." Back in the corridor, the Avengers continued to fight their way through the enforcers, their movements synchronized and fluid. "We need to get to the central chamber," Steve shouted over the cacophony of battle. "That's where Kang will be. Right behind you," Natasha replied, ducking under a blast and launching a counterattack. Suddenly, the ground shook violently as the chronoguard emerged, their presence radiating a palpable aura of menace. They charged forward, weapons ready, and the Avengers prepared for a new wave of combat. "Looks like we've got company," Clint said, knocking an arrow and firing at the advancing guards. The arrow struck one in the shoulder, but the warrior merely shook it off, continuing its advance. "Stay focused," Steve commanded. "We take them down together." Wanda concentrated her energy, creating a protective barrier around the team as the chronoguard unleashed a barrage of blaster fire. The energy shield flickered but held strong, absorbing the incoming attacks. "Now, Natasha," Steve shouted, and she sprang into action, leaping over the barrier to engage the nearest chronoguard in hand-to-hand combat. The clash of metal echoed through the corridor as they fought fiercely. "Clint, cover her," Sam called out, soaring above to provide aerial support while firing energy blasts. "Got it," Clint replied, quickly adjusting his aim and taking down 2 more enforcers with expert precision. As the battle raged on, the Avengers began to gain ground, the chronoguard struggling against their combined might. Wanda unleashed a wave of magic that sent several of them sprawling, and Sam dove in, delivering powerful strikes that incapacitated another group. "Keep pushing," Steve yelled, leading the charge deeper into the fortress. "We're almost there." Finally, they reached the entrance to the central chamber, a massive door adorned with ancient symbols pulsating with energy. "This is it," Tony exclaimed, catching his breath. "We breach it now." "I'll handle the door," Wanda said, channeling her magic into the ancient locks. The runes glowed, and with a pulse of energy, the door swung open, revealing the heart of Kang's fortress. Inside, the chamber was a swirling mass of temporal energy, with screens lining the walls, displaying streams of time flowing like rivers. At the center stood Kang, surrounded by a shimmering field of power, his expression a mix of anger and amusement. "Welcome, Avengers," he sneered, the energy crackling around him. "You've made it this far, but this is where your journey ends. Not if we have anything to say about it," Steve shouted, stepping forward with unwavering determination. The team moved into formation, ready to engage. "Together!" Natasha cried, the team rallying behind her, united in their purpose. "Fools!" Kang bellowed, raising his hands. "You think you can challenge the Master of Time?" The chamber erupted into chaos as Kang unleashed waves of energy, warping the space around them. Time distorted, creating flickering images of alternate realities that threatened to engulf the Avengers. "Focus!" Tony shouted, bracing against the energy surge. "We need to disrupt his connection to the Nexus." "Wanda, can you shield us?" Sam called, dodging an energy blast that nearly struck him. "I'll do my best," Wanda replied, her magic flaring as she conjured a barrier to protect the team from Kang's assault. "Now, move in," Steve commanded, leading the charge toward Kang, determination burning in his eyes. The Avengers surged forward, their powers combining in a dazzling display of light and energy. As they closed the distance, Kang's energy shifted, creating a powerful storm of time and space. "You cannot hope to defeat me," he roared, the winds howling around them. But the Avengers pressed on, united in their fight. With each step, they pushed against the tide of temporal energy, the air thick with tension and power. "Together!" Steve shouted, raising his shield. "Now!" Wanda unleashed a torrent of magic, intertwining it with Tony's repulsor blasts. The combined force slammed into Kang, momentarily staggering him. "What is this?" he snarled, shock flickering across his features. "Your end!" Natasha cried, leaping into the fray with a fierce battle cry. She attacked with precision, landing blow after blow, distracting Kang long enough for Steve and Tony to move in closer. "Clint now!" Steve shouted, as Clint let loose a flurry of arrows, each one laced with explosive energy. The arrows struck true, detonating around Kang and sending shockwaves rippling through the chamber. "You cannot destroy me," Kang bellowed, fury etched on his face. "Watch us!" Sam yelled, delivering a powerful strike that connected with Kang, sending him reeling back. With a collective push, the Avengers surged forward, their powers intertwining in a final, unified assault. The energy collided with Kang, engulfing him in a blinding explosion of light and power. As the dust settled, the Avengers stood together, panting and bruised but victorious. The central chamber flickered with fading energy, the screens flickering off one by one. They had disrupted Kang's control over the Nexus, but they knew this was not the end. "Is he?" Clint started, glancing around. "We'll find out," Steve replied, scanning the chamber for any sign of Kang. Suddenly, a chilling laugh echoed through the chamber, reverberating against the walls. "You think you've won?" Kang's voice taunted, a sinister edge slicing through the air. "You've merely delayed the inevitable." The screens flickered back to life, revealing alternate timelines in turmoil. Universes collapsing, worlds consumed by chaos. "You cannot escape your fates, Avengers. Time is my ally, and it will be my weapon against you." "Not if we can help it," Tony declared, determination igniting in his eyes. "We'll fight you at every turn, Kang. You won't succeed." "Then come, Avengers," Kang taunted. "Let the games begin again." The air crackled with tension, the Avengers steeling themselves for the battle that lay ahead. They had won this round, but the war was far from over. United in purpose, they would face whatever challenges awaited them, ready to fight against the darkness threatening to engulf their worlds. The time for action had come once more, and the Avengers would not back down. As they regrouped, plans began to form. They would prepare, gather allies, and strategize their next move. Each member of the team understood the stakes. They were guardians of time itself, and the fate of countless worlds rested upon their shoulders. "Let's get to work," Steve said, a fierce determination shining in his eyes. "We have a universe to save." Chapter 10. The Eternal Reckoning. The Avengers stood at the edge of the temporal divide, facing the vast rift where Kang had embedded himself, hidden within a complex lattice of fractured timelines and infinite possibilities. Around them, time warped and twisted, each ripple revealing glimpses of alternate futures, parallel worlds, and the devastating consequences of failure. It was as if reality itself were on the brink, poised to shatter under Kang's relentless ambition. "Every second we delay, he gets stronger," Tony murmured, adjusting his armor. The suit hummed with an intense, almost desperate energy, all systems calibrated to peak efficiency for this final showdown. Whatever he's got in store, we're facing it together. Steve nodded, his gaze fixed on the chaotic horizon before them. We go in, disrupt his control, and take him down, no matter the cost. This ends today. Wanda's eyes glowed with raw power, her fingers crackling with crimson energy. He's distorting reality itself. I can feel him manipulating the boundaries between our world and others. If he succeeds, there may be no coming back. Sam clasped a hand on her shoulder, his voice firm. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. The team fell into formation. Each member braced for the unimaginable trials awaiting them. As they took their first steps toward the rift, it felt like stepping into the unknown depths of time itself. Inside the temporal fortress, Kang observed their approach, a faint smile curling his lips. He was seated upon a throne surrounded by cascading streams of energy, pulsing timelines that he controlled with the mere flick of his fingers. Each timeline was a story, a life, a reality he could shape, destroy, or twist to his will. They come, he whispered to himself, a dark satisfaction in his tone. Bold, foolish heroes. But they are no match for a master of eternity. With a single thought, he summoned his most elite guardians, creatures torn from the folds of time, armored monstrosities who had fought and conquered in countless eras. They emerged from the shadows, their forms flickering with the energy of ages long past and futures yet unseen. Delay them, he commanded. I have no time for distractions. As the Avengers pushed through the fractured timeline, they were met with a force unlike any they'd ever faced. Armored warriors emerged from every angle, wielding weapons that defied all logic, blades made from pure energy, shields that rippled with temporal distortions, and ranged weapons that seemed to fire in bursts of both past and future. Tony fired a repulsor blast, but his target vanished before the shot hit, reappearing seconds later to strike him from behind. "This is insane," he shouted, recalibrating his suit to counter the temporal shifts. "They're moving between time. Watch your backs." Steve and Natasha fought side by side, their movements synchronized as they struck against enemies who appeared and disappeared in a flash of light. "Stay together," Steve called, blocking a blow with his shield. "They're trying to disorient us." Wanda concentrated, her hands weaving an intricate spell that encased the team in a protective aura, buffering them from the temporal chaos around them. "This should help. Don't stray too far." But the enemies kept coming, each one more formidable than the last, each attack laced with the disorienting effects of time manipulation. The Avengers pressed forward, every blow a struggle, every step a defiance of Kang's overwhelming control. At the heart of the fortress, Kang's patience wore thin. "Enough," he snarled, his voice laced with irritation. "If they wish to challenge me, let them face the true power of eternity." With a wave of his hand, he unleashed a surge of temporal energy that cascaded through the fortress like a tidal wave, twisting the very fabric of reality. The ground beneath the Avengers rippled, the walls around them shifting from one era to another. Ancient stone one moment, sleek metal the next, a swirling vortex of conflicting histories. The team staggered, disoriented by the shifting reality, but Steve's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay focused. He's trying to break us. Keep moving forward." Suddenly, Kang appeared before them, his form wreathed in energy, his eyes glowing with the power of ages. "You should have remained in your own time, Avengers," he taunted, his voice echoing through the hall. "Here, in the heart of eternity, I am invincible." Tony stepped forward, his voice defiant. "We've heard that line before. Every tyrant thinks they're unstoppable, until they meet us." Kang laughed, a dark, hollow sound. "Your bravado is admirable, but it will not save you." With a flick of his wrist, he summoned waves of energy that washed over the team, each wave a blast of temporal distortion that threatened to unmake them. Wanda countered with her magic, creating a barrier that absorbed the brunt of Kang's attack. "You may control time, but I am no stranger to chaos," she declared, her voice fierce as she held her ground. "Impressive," Kang admitted, his expression momentarily intrigued, but ultimately futile. With a flourish, he shifted the timeline around them, and suddenly, the Avengers found themselves surrounded by twisted versions of themselves, dark reflections of their own worst fears and failures. These shadowed doubles advanced with malicious intent, their eyes filled with the same deadly determination as the heroes themselves. "Is this some kind of joke?" Sam muttered, sizing up his doppelganger, who wore a wicked grin and wielded twin blades. "This is Kang's attempt to break us," Steve replied, gripping his shield. Don't let him. We fight together, no matter what. The Avengers clashed with their dark counterparts, each battle a brutal reflection of their own strengths and weaknesses. Natasha faced a version of herself who fought with ruthless precision, her moves a mirror image of Natasha's own. You can't win, the doppelganger taunted, her voice dripping with malice. I am every regret, every failure you've ever known. Natasha gritted her teeth, deflecting a blow and countering with a swift strike. Maybe, but I'm also everything you'll never be, a part of something greater than myself. Steve battled his own reflection, a twisted, broken version of himself who wielded a corrupted shield, the metal dark and bloodstained. You're nothing without the fight, the dark Steve sneered, his voice a harsh rasp. Just a soldier clinging to the past. I don't fight for the past, Steve replied, his voice steady as he blocked a strike. I fight for the future, and for those I protect. One by one, the Avengers overcame their dark reflections, each victory a testament to their resilience, their unity, and their will to fight for a world beyond themselves. As the last shadow fell, Kang's expression darkened, his patience finally shattered. Enough, he roared, unleashing a torrent of energy that sent shockwaves through the fortress, tearing at the very fabric of time. But the Avengers held their ground, defying the impossible forces that surrounded them. Tony, battered but unbroken, looked at his teammates, a fierce determination in his eyes. It's time we show him what it really means to be unstoppable. With a shared nod, the Avengers launched their final assault, each member pushing themselves to their absolute limits. Wanda unleashed a torrent of magic, her energy intertwining with Tony's repulsor blasts to create a focused beam that cut through Kang's defenses. Sam and Natasha took to the air, drawing Kang's attention with rapid, coordinated strikes, while Clint provided cover from a distance, each shot perfectly timed to exploit Kang's moments of distraction. Steve led the charge, his shield raised as he closed the distance between them and their foe. This is for everyone you've hurt, Kang, he declared, his voice a steady promise. And for every life you've tried to control. Kang staggered, his confidence faltering as the combined might of the Avengers broke through his defenses. No, he shouted, his voice laced with desperation. I am beyond you. I am eternal. But the Avengers pressed on, unrelenting, their unity an unbreakable force that Kang could not overcome. With one final, coordinated strike, they unleashed a torrent of energy that collided with Kang, engulfing him in a blinding explosion of light and power. The fortress trembled, the walls collapsing as time itself seemed to unravel. But as the dust settled, the Avengers stood victorious, their breaths heavy, their bodies bruised, but their spirits unbroken. The temporal rift began to stabilize, the chaotic energy dissipating as reality reasserted itself. The Avengers gathered, sharing a moment of quiet relief as they watched the remnants of Kang's fortress fade into the ether. We did it, Wanda murmured, her voice filled with exhaustion and triumph. Steve nodded, a weary smile on his face. Together, as they made their way back to the Quinjet, the enormity of their victory settled upon them. They had defied a power beyond comprehension, fought against the very fabric of time, and emerged victorious. But they knew that their journey was far from over. New threats would arise, and they would face them, as they always had, together. As the Quinjet ascended, the Avengers cast one last glance at the place where Kang's fortress had stood. It was gone now, a memory, a scar in the fabric of time that would serve as a reminder of their sacrifice, their courage, and their unbreakable bond. And as they soared into the unknown, they knew one thing for certain. They were the Avengers, and they would protect the world, no matter the cost. The remnants of Kang's fortress lay smoldering in the aftermath of their desperate battle. The Avengers regrouped outside, the vast expanse of the temporal rift pulsating ominously above them. Time seemed to warp and twist, the fabric of reality visibly fraying around the edges. The air was thick with the scent of charred metal and the echoes of battle. Is everyone all right? Steve asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern as he scanned his teammates. I'm good, Natasha replied, brushing dust off her suit, her eyes sharp and alert. I've had worse, Clint added, rolling his shoulder as if to shake off the pain. I'm fine, Sam confirmed, his wings folding neatly behind him, ready for whatever was next. Wanda? Tony asked, turning to her. She stood silently, her brow furrowed in concentration, the remnants of her magic still crackling at her fingertips. I can feel his presence, she replied slowly, her voice low. He's still out there, lurking, waiting for us to make our next move. Then we need to act, Steve said decisively. We can't let him regroup. If we allow him time to plan, we'll be at a disadvantage. I'll contact the others, Tony said, pulling out his communicator. We need everyone we can get. The Guardians, Dr. Strange, anyone who can help us tackle this threat. As he spoke, the air around them shimmered, and the rift began to pulse violently, drawing their attention. What's happening? Clint exclaimed, his eyes widening as the rift began to glow brighter. It's the temporal nexus, Wanda said, stepping forward, her senses heightened. Kang is trying to manipulate it again. Before they could react, a massive wave of energy surged from the rift, colliding with the ground and sending the Avengers sprawling. The force knocked them off their feet, and chaos erupted as they scrambled to regain their footing. Stay together, Steve shouted, pushing himself up and surveying the chaos. We need to stabilize this situation before he uses it to his advantage. As they fought against the disorienting energy, the rift began to swirl with images of alternate timelines. Worlds where the Avengers had failed, where Kang ruled unchallenged. Look, Sam shouted, pointing toward one of the swirling images. In it, he saw himself and the team falling one by one, their efforts futile against the overwhelming power of Kang. Those are the futures we're trying to prevent. Natasha cried, recognizing the danger. We can't let him control our destinies. Tony, still recovering from the impact, analyzed the rift. If we can disrupt the energy flow, we can prevent Kang from manipulating it further. How do we do that? Clint asked, glancing at Wanda, who was visibly strained. We need to create a feedback loop, Wanda explained, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. If we channel our energies into the rift at the same time, we can destabilize it. Then let's do it, Steve urged, determination solidifying his resolve. We'll channel our powers together. On my mark, we push all our energy into the nexus and reverse the flow. The Avengers regrouped, standing shoulder to shoulder, their powers ready to merge. Get ready, Steve instructed, his voice calm yet commanding. 1, 2, 3. With a unified roar, they thrust their powers toward the rift, energy swirling around them as they focused their intentions. Light surged from their hands, intertwining and cascading into the temporal rift. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the rift began to convulse violently, the energy ebbing and flowing like a storm. Keep pushing, Sam shouted, sweat beading on his forehead as he concentrated. The rift flickered with blinding light, the images of alternate realities becoming more chaotic, warping into darkness. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the rift, and the Avengers staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief. Kang stepped through the rift, his armor gleaming, a cruel smile on his lips. You think you can stop me? He taunted, raising his hands as a surge of energy cascaded around him. You're merely delaying the inevitable. Not if we can help it, Tony shouted, charging forward. As Kang unleashed a wave of energy toward them, the Avengers braced themselves. Wanda threw up a barrier just in time, the force of Kang's attack colliding with her magic. The energy crackled and exploded, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Now, Steve roared, rallying his teammates. Together. The Avengers surged forward, each one contributing their unique powers to the fray. Tony unleashed a barrage of repulsor blasts, Clint peppered the area with arrows, and Sam took to the skies, diving down for aerial assaults. Wanda concentrated her magic, reinforcing Steve's shield as he led the charge, determination burning in his eyes. We can do this, he shouted, rallying the team. For every world that depends on us. The battle intensified as they pushed against Kang's overwhelming power. Time warped around them, creating illusions and duplicates of their foes, each one a distorted reflection of their darkest fears. Stay focused, Natasha cried, her voice cutting through the chaos. They're just illusions. As they fought through the onslaught, the Avengers began to find their rhythm, their teamwork honed through years of experience. They worked as a unit, countering Kang's attacks and striking back with precision. Kang unleashed a wave of temporal energy, warping the battlefield around them. You cannot escape time, he roared, eyes glowing with power. But the Avengers pressed on, their resolve unbroken. We will fight you until the end, Steve shouted defiantly, charging at Kang. With a powerful strike, Steve collided with Kang, the force of their impact sending shockwaves through the chamber. The two clashed in a fierce hand-to-hand combat, each blow resonating with the weight of their convictions. In the midst of the battle, Wanda focused her energy on the Nexus, her eyes shimmering with power. We have to disrupt his connection, she cried, channeling her magic toward the rift. I'll help, Sam called, diving in to join her. Together, they unleashed a surge of energy, intertwining their powers in a dazzling display. As their magic collided with the rift, a blinding light erupted, destabilizing the very fabric of reality. "No!" Kang shouted, realizing the danger too late. "You cannot stop me." But it was too late. The rift erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, sending shockwaves that reverberated through time itself. The ground shook, and the air crackled with energy as the nexus collapsed upon itself. "Hold on!" Tony yelled, bracing himself against the force. As the energy surged, the illusions around them shattered, revealing the true battlefield. The Avengers rallied together, fighting against the tidal wave of power threatening to engulf them. With a final, desperate push, Wanda and Sam combined their energy, creating a brilliant flash of light that engulfed Kang. "You will not win," Wanda shouted, determination ringing in her voice. Kang's face twisted in rage as he was enveloped in the energy. "This is not over," he bellowed, his voice fading into the void. And then, with a resounding crack, the rift imploded, collapsing in on itself, taking Kang with it. The shockwave rippled outward, throwing the Avengers back as the chamber erupted in blinding light. When the light faded, the air grew still. The rift had vanished, leaving behind a calmness that settled over the battlefield. The Avengers lay sprawled on the ground, catching their breath as they processed what had just happened. "Did we do it?" Clint asked, glancing around. "I think so," Natasha replied, slowly pushing herself up. "We stopped him," Steve said, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washing over him. But as they regrouped, a heavy silence fell over them. They had won this battle, but the war against Kang had taken its toll. Each of them bore the weight of their experiences, the struggle against time and fate evident in their eyes. "We need to regroup and assess the situation," Tony said, breaking the silence. "There may still be remnants of his forces we need to deal with." "Agreed," Steve replied. "And we need to ensure that the temporal rift doesn't destabilize further. We've seen what can happen when time is manipulated." As they began to gather their bearings, Wanda looked up at the remnants of the fortress, now crumbling and silent. "This isn't just about Kang," she said quietly. "We need to prepare for whatever threats lie ahead. There are always forces trying to disrupt the balance of time." "I know," Steve replied, his tone serious. "We'll be ready. We've faced impossible odds before, and we'll do it again." As the sun began to rise, casting golden light over the battlefield, the Avengers stood together, united in purpose. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. "Let's go home," Tony said, looking at each of his teammates, a sense of camaraderie igniting among them. "Together," Sam added, his eyes gleaming with determination. As they made their way back, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them, the Avengers knew that they would always stand united against the darkness, guardians of the multiverse, defenders of time itself. They were the Avengers, and together they were unstoppable. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey through the Kang Dynasty. Your support means the world to us. If you liked what you heard, please take a moment to like this story, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more exciting tales. We appreciate your feedback and look forward to bringing you even more adventures in the future. Stay tuned and remember, together, we can face any challenge that comes our way.